You cross the room and pour a small amount of water from a clay pitcher into a shallow basin. The water is room temperature and leaves a slight mineral scent on your hands as you splash your face, rubbing the sleep from your eyes with the heels of your palms. You do not look in the small polished bronze mirror that hangs on the wall because there is no need. You know the face that looks back, brown from sun and wind, with lines at the corners of the eyes, from squinting at long roads. You dry your hands on a scrap of linen cloth, take your staff from where it leans beside the door, and step out into the pre-dawn air. The staff is made of chestnut wood, smoothed by years of palm sweat, with a small iron ferrule at the tip that makes a quiet tick against the cobbles when you walk. The sound is a familiar one, the first note of the day. The street outside the lodging house is narrow and unpaved, more a wide alley between stone buildings. Above you the sky holds the last few stars, pale pinpricks in a fabric of deep indigo that is just beginning to pale at the very edge, where the sea lies invisible but ever present. A rooster crows somewhere far away, a sound so common it barely registers, and then a dog barks twice and is silent. You turn left and walk past the closed doors of other lodgings, a baker's shop with its shutters still down, a small fountain where a trickle of water runs continuously into a stone basin. The water sounds like a whisper. You do not hurry. The road you will walk today and for many days has been there for centuries, and it will not move before you are ready. The salt warehouse stands at the end of the street, right where the buildings give way to the flat open land of the coastal plain. It is a long, low structure built of rough-hewn limestone blocks, with a roof of curved terracotta tiles that are dark with moisture from the night air. A large wooden door, reinforced with iron bands, is already pushed partway open, and a faint orange glow spills out into the darkness. You know the man who tends the warehouse at this hour, a quiet older fellow named Morrow, who rarely speaks beyond what is necessary. He is inside now. You can tell by the thin line of smoke rising from the small brazier he keeps burning in the corner. You slip through the open door and your eyes adjust to the lamplight. The interior is one great room with a hard-packed earth floor, and it smells of brine, dry grain, and old wood smoke. Along the walls, salt sacks are stacked in neat rows, each sack made of heavy undyed linen, tied at the neck with a slip of hempen cord. They are the same sacks you have carried 100 times before, and they wait for you now like silent passengers. Morrow looks up from his stool near the brazier and nods, a single downward tilt of the head. You nod back. There is no need for words. You know exactly which sacks are yours, the ones set aside by the far wall with a small chalk mark on the top one. You walk over to them and crouch down, setting your staff aside so that it leans against the wall. The nearest sack is cool and slightly damp to the touch, the salt inside having absorbed some of the night's humidity. You lift it with both hands, testing the weight. It is not heavy in the way a stone is heavy, but heavy in the way a living thing is heavy, dense and full. The sack makes a soft rustling sound as you shift it, the thousands of tiny salt crystals grinding gently against one another inside their linen prison. You carry it to the center of the room, where the 2 mules stand waiting. The mules are in a small holding stall at the back of the warehouse, a pair of sturdy brown animals with patient dark eyes and long ears that twitch now and then at the small sounds of the building settling. The first mule is called Surus, though you rarely speak his name aloud. He is the lead animal, slightly taller, with a white star on his forehead. The second is a shorter, wider mule with a coat the color of dry grass, and she is called simply the little one, the smaller, though she carries just as much. Both mules are already wearing their pack saddles, wooden frames padded with sheep's wool and covered in worn leather that has molded to their backs over years of use. You approach Cyrus first and run your hand along his neck, feeling the coarse hair and the warmth of his skin underneath. His ear flicks toward you and then away, a small acknowledgment. The other mule shifts her weight and exhales a long breath through her nose. You lift the first salt sack and place it carefully across the right side of Cyrus's pack saddle, holding it steady while you tie the leather straps that will keep it in place. The straps are brown and supple, oiled regularly to prevent cracking, and you pull them snug without over-tightening, your fingers working the simple iron rings with a practiced economy of motion. You fetch a second sack from the pile and balance the load on the left side, adjusting the position until the weight sits evenly. The mule stands perfectly still, and you feel the slight sway as the animal absorbs the added burden, settling into the new center of gravity with the ease of long habit. The salt inside the sacks continues its faint, constant sound, a sound like a distant shingle beach. You move to the second mule and repeat the process, first one sack, then the other, your hands moving at a steady pace, neither slow nor fast, like a water wheel turning in a gentle current. After the 4 main sacks are loaded, you add 2 smaller bags to the top of each mule's load, bags that hold the supplies for the journey, a block of hard cheese wrapped in a clean cloth, a round loaf of coarse bread, a handful of dried figs, a small leather pouch of toasted barley grains. These you tie down with an extra length of cord, testing each knot with a firm tug. Your water skin hangs from a hook on the wall, a goat leather bag with a wooden stopper, and you fill it from the clay cistern that collects rainwater from the warehouse roof. The water is cool and tastes faintly of the tiles it washed over, clean and plain. You hang the skin from your belt by its strap, where it will bounce gently against your thigh with every step. You take a moment then to check the mule's hooves, lifting each foot in turn and picking out any small stone with the tip of your eating knife. The hooves are hard and dark, like polished horn, and they smell of iron and earth. The mules accept this inspection without complaint, shifting only slightly when you ask them to lift. You check the girth straps, the belly bands that keep the saddles from sliding, and you find them all in good order. The oil lamp on his wooden shelf flickers slightly as a draught finds its way through a crack in the door, and the shadows dance once across the ceiling and then are still. The brazier's coals glow a steady orange, and Marrow's silhouette hunches beside it, motionless as part of the furniture. When everything is ready, you take your staff in hand again and click your tongue softly, the signal that means we go now. Cyrus lifts his head and steps forward, his heavy hooves making muffled thuds on the packed earth, and the second mule follows automatically, her nose almost touching her companion's tail. You lead them out of the warehouse through the wide door, and the transition from the closed lamplit interior to the open air of the pre-dawn is like stepping through a curtain. The sky has lightened to a pale pearl grey, and the first hints of colour are beginning to show on the horizon, a thin wash of apricot and dull rose, where the sun will eventually rise. A few more birds are calling now, sparrows mostly, chattering in the eaves of the warehouse. The air smells of the sea, of damp earth. of the faint smoke from the brazier. You breathe it in deeply, not as a sigh, but as a simple filling of the lungs. The road begins right at the warehouse door, a strip of worn basalt stones laid down by engineers many generations ago, the famous Via Salaria that connects the salt flats to the interior valleys and beyond. The stones are dark grey, almost black in the low light, and they are fitted together so closely that even the smallest weed struggles to grow between them. The surface is worn smooth in the center from centuries of hooves and sandals and cartwheels, and it is slightly raised in the middle so that water runs off to the sides during rain. You step onto this road with the mules behind you, and the sound of their hooves changes immediately from the soft thud of earth to the clear, crisp clop of stone. It is a sound that will be your companion for every mile of the journey, a steady, rhythmic pulse like a very slow heartbeat. You walk eastward away from the coast and toward the dark, distant line of the Apennine foothills that are just now becoming visible as the darkness thins. The plain around you is flat and open, divided into fields by low stone walls and lines of cypress trees that stand black against the lightening sky. Some fields are bare, the soil turned over and waiting for planting. Others hold the pale green shoots of winter wheat. The air here is still cold enough to make your breath visible, but you can tell by the clarity of the sky that the day will be warm later. You loosen your cloak slightly, letting it hang open at the throat, and you adjust the grip on your staff, feeling the smooth wood slide against your calloused palm. The mules follow without guidance, and their rhythm becomes your rhythm. You do not think about the distance ahead or the hours it will take. You only think about this one step, and then the next, and the one after that. Your mind settles into a quiet place, a kind of walking trance where small details present themselves and then pass away without lingering. The way the morning light catches the edge of a broken roof tile, the soft rustling of a lizard in the dry grass beside the road, the distant intermittent braying of a donkey somewhere out of sight, the sound of your own breathing, steady and unhurried, the weight of your tunic against your skin, the slow swing of the water skin against your thigh. All of it simply is, without comment. You pass a milestone, a tall cylindrical stone set into the ground with a carved number on its face, but you do not need to read it. You know this road by the shape of the hills, by the particular bend of a certain olive tree, by the small bridge over the little stream that runs almost dry in summer, but now holds a thin ribbon of water that glints in the half-light. The stream makes a quiet gurgling sound as you cross the bridge, a sound that mingles with the clop of hooves and then fades. You pause to let the mules drink from a shallow pool beside the bridge, and they lower their heads slowly, their muzzles breaking the surface with gentle ripples. The water drips from their chins when they lift their heads, and you watch the drops fall back into the stream and become part of it again. The sun rises while you are walking, not in a sudden burst, but in a gradual, almost imperceptible spreading of light. The apricot glow on the horizon intensifies, turns gold, then dissolves into the pale blue of the daytime sky. The first direct rays touch the top of a distant cypress, turning its dark green needles to a brilliant emerald for just a moment, and then the light spills across the plain and warms your shoulders through your cloak. The mules seem to notice the change as well, their ears picking up just slightly, their pace becoming a fraction more lively. You let them set the tempo. Your body is fully awake now, and the mild stiffness in your legs from sleeping on the thin pallet has worked itself out, replaced by the easy flowing motion of walking on flat ground. After about a mile, the road bends to the left and passes through a small cluster of buildings that is not quite a village, just a few houses and a mill with a large water wheel that is turning lazily in a mill race. The wheel is made of wood, dark with age and moisture, and it creaks rhythmically, a deep wooden note that harmonizes with the clop of the hooves. A woman in a pale dress is sweeping the threshold of one of the houses, her broom making a soft shushing sound. She looks up as you pass and gives the barest nod, which you return. No words. The smell of fresh bread wafts from somewhere, and you remember the bread in your pack, but you are not hungry yet. The hunger will come later, slowly, like the full warmth of the sun. Beyond the mill the road rises slightly, just enough that the flat coastal plain begins to roll into the first low hills. The basalt paving stones give way for a stretch to packed gravel and crushed limestone, and the sound underfoot changes to a softer crunch. The olive trees become more numerous, their silvery green leaves shimmering in the new sunlight. Their trunks are gnarled and twisted, very old, and you can see where bark has been recently harvested from some of them, leaving pale orange patches on the wood. Under the largest tree, a man is sitting on a stone, mending a net. His hands move slowly, threading a bone needle through the mesh, and he does not look up. You walk by and the scene is already behind you, absorbed into the fabric of the road. The sun continues its slow climb and the day warms. You loosen your cloak further and eventually take it off entirely, folding it over the top of Ceres's load. The mule does not react except to flick an ear when the cloth brushes his flank. You untie the water skin from your belt, pull out the wooden stopper, and drink. The water is still cool enough to be pleasant, and you let a little of it trickle down your chin before wiping it away with the back of your hand. The second mule, the smaller one, makes a soft nickering sound, not a demand but a comment, and you speak to her in a low tone, just a few meaningless words said in a calm voice. She swishes her tail and walks on. The road ahead stretches out in a long, gentle curve that disappears behind a stand of umbrella pines. The mountains are clearer now, their lower slopes a patchwork of dark forest and lighter rock, their tops still hazy with distance. You can make out the faint line of the road climbing into the trees, a pale scar on the green hillside that you will follow tomorrow and the day after. But that is a long way ahead, and for now you are still on the plain, still in the familiar country of small farms and old olive groves. Your shadow walks beside you, a long blue shape that slides over the stones and the grass, matching you step for step. You think about the salt sacks behind you, rocking gently with the mule's motion. The salt came from the shallow evaporation pools on the coast, where seawater was let in and then left under the sun until only the white crust remained. Men with wooden rakes had gathered it into piles, and it was packed into these same sacks, which were then loaded onto carts and brought to the warehouse. Now it is on muleback, moving inland to a village market where it will be exchanged for mountain wool, the clay pots for metal tools. The salt itself is coarse and greyish, not the fine white powder of the table, but a working salt, a salt for preserving meat, for tanning leather, for flavouring the evening stew. You have tasted it many times, and it tastes like the sea, like the mineral tang of the earth, like nothing else. These thoughts pass through your mind without urgency, as if they belonged to someone else. They rise and then sink away, leaving only the road and the walking. The sound of the hooves, the creak of the pack saddles, the soft jingle of the iron rings on the harness, the sun on your neck, the dust that rises in small puffs when your sandal scuffs a patch of dry ground, the small wild flowers that grow in the cracks of the road, tiny white and yellow blossoms that you notice without stopping. All of it flows together into a single quiet stream of experience, neither happy nor sad, just present. After another mile or so, you come to a place where the road splits briefly, one branch leading to a small farmhouse, the other continuing straight toward the hills. You take the straight branch without hesitation, and the farmhouse recedes into the distance, its chimney sending up a thin thread of smoke that stands almost vertical in the still air. A dog comes out from behind a wall and watches you pass, its tail wagging once, then sits down and scratches its ear with a hind leg. You watch the dog for a moment and then look forward again. The pine trees loom larger now, their dense, rounded crowns casting pools of deep shade onto the road ahead. The air under them will be cooler, and you look forward to that coolness in the same way you look forward to the midday rest, not with impatience, but with a quiet acknowledgement that it will come when it comes. The last stretch of open plain runs alongside a field of barley that ripples in a light breeze, making a sound like a woman brushing her hair. The grain is still green, weeks from harvest, and it undulates in waves that move from one end of the field to the other. You watch the waves for a while, the movement strangely soothing, and then you shift your gaze back to the mules. Cyrus has a small burr stuck in his tail, a brown prickly thing, and you reach down and pull it loose without breaking stride, tossing it to the side of the road. The mule's tail swishes once in thanks or irritation, you cannot tell which, and then everything is as it was. The sun is higher now, and the shadows have grown shorter and sharper. You are approaching the point where the plain ends and the forested slopes begin, the threshold of the mountains. In another hour you will be among the trees, in a different kind of light and a different kind of silence. But that is still ahead, and this is still now. The even clop of hooves, the weight of your staff in your hand, the salt sacks rocking in their steady rhythm, and the road unspooling beneath your feet like a thread drawn slowly from a spindle, patient and without end. The road continues its gentle arc across the plain, and as you walk the land begins to change in small, almost imperceptible ways. The flat fields that stretched unbroken to the horizon now ripple into low swells and shallow dips. The first faint stirrings of the terrain that will, many miles from here, rise into proper mountains. The basalt paving stones underfoot remain smooth and dark, but the weeds growing between them are different now, tougher and more sparse, with small woody stems instead of the soft green shoots of the coastal flats. You notice this without stopping, your eyes taking in the information as automatically as your lungs take in air. The mules notice too, perhaps through the changing scent of the earth or the subtle increase in the grade, because Cyrus adjusts his pace by a fraction, settling into the slightly slower rhythm that uphill walking requires. His hooves strike the stone with the same steady clop, but with a marginally longer pause between each beat, and you match your steps to his without thinking. The sun has cleared the horizon fully now and hangs low in the eastern sky, a pale gold disk that warms the left side of your face and casts a long shadow to your right, a shadow that slides over the road surface and the low stone wall that now runs alongside the path. The wall is made of local limestone, flat grey stones stacked without mortar, their surfaces patched with pale green lichen and small cushions of dry moss. You have seen hundreds of walls like this one, and you know that they mark the boundaries of farm plots, separating one family's olive trees from another's grazing land. And you also know that they are very old, so old that the men who built them have been gone for more generations than anyone can count. The wall follows the road for 100 paces and then turns away at a right angle, disappearing into a grove of twisted olive trees, whose leaves shimmer silver green in the morning light. At the corner of the wall a small lizard basks on a flat stone, its body the same grey colour as the rock, and it darts away into a crevice as your shadow passes over it, a movement so quick it is barely a flicker. Beyond the olive grove the road straightens again, and you can see a long way ahead, perhaps 2 miles or more, a pale stripe of stone running toward the dark smudge of the foothills that now dominate the horizon. The hills are no longer a distant line, but a presence, their lower slopes showing individual trees and patches of exposed rock, their upper reaches still softened by the haze of distance. The space between you and them feels open and yet somehow intimate, as if the plain is drawing you toward them with a slow, patient pull. You shift your grip on your staff, feeling the smooth chestnut wood warm from your palm, and you let your gaze wander across the landscape. To your left, a field of young wheat stretches away in neat furrows, the green shoots just high enough to ripple when a breeze passes. To your right, a pasture lies fallow, its grass brown and dry from the summer sun, and a small flock of sheep grazes in the distance, their bells making a faint, irregular clanking that drifts across the still air like the sound of a distant memory. A shepherd sits on a rocky outcrop, a dark shape that does not move, and you do not wave or call out because there is no need. Your presence on this road is as routine as the flight of crows. The road surface changes for a short stretch where water has washed away the finer gravel, leaving a patch of rough cobbles that clatter slightly under the mule's hooves. The sound is sharper here, more uneven, and you guide Suras toward the smoother edge of the road where a strip of packed earth runs parallel to the stone. He moves over willingly, his large dark eye rolling back to check your position, and the smaller mule follows precisely in his tracks, her nose level with his flank. You walk on the earth strip for a few hundred paces until the cobbles smooth out again, and then you drift back to the center of the road where the walking is easiest. The salt sacks sway with the motion of the mules, the linen fabric creaking softly, a sound like an old door opening very slowly. You glance at the sacks out of habit, checking the lashings and the balance, but everything is as it should be. The knots have not loosened, the loads have not shifted, and the mules show no sign of discomfort. The sun climbs higher, and the warmth becomes more noticeable. You unlace the neck of your tunic another finger's width and feel the air move across your collarbone, a small coolness that is welcome. The water skin bounces gently against your hip, and you consider drinking, but decide to wait until the next good stopping place, a memory of which floats somewhere in the back of your mind like a faint scent. The road ahead bends slightly to the right, following the contour of a low hill that rises gradually from the plain, its slopes covered with a mix of scrub and scattered umbrella pines. The pines are tall and stately, their trunks straight as columns, their dense, rounded crowns a deep green-black that contrasts with the pale blue of the sky. Under one of these pines a stone bench has been placed, a simple slab set on 2 uprights, put there long ago by someone who knew that travelers would appreciate a place to rest. You do not stop, but you note the bench as you pass, its surface worn smooth by the backs and thighs of countless walkers who came before you. The shade under the pine tree looks cool and inviting, but the morning is still young and your legs are fresh, so you continue. A cart appears in the distance, coming toward you from the direction of the hills. At first, it is just a dark dot on the pale road, then a shape with a moving blur at its front, and then finally a recognizable vehicle, a two-wheeled ox cart with a driver sitting on a wooden plank. The ox, a large, slow-moving animal with wide horns and a patient expression. The cart is loaded with bundles of something, perhaps wool or fleeces, covered with a tarp that is tied down with ropes. You see the driver raise a hand, and you raise yours in return, a simple greeting exchange between two people who share the road, but do not need to speak. As the cart draws closer, the driver, a middle-aged man with a sun-darkened face and a cap of felt, gives a quiet nod. You nod back, and without either of you breaking stride, you pass each other. The cart's wheels rumble on the stone. The ox's heavy hooves thud a slow four-beat rhythm, and then the sound fades behind you, absorbed by the open air. For a moment you smell the ox, a warm, grassy animal scent, and then the breeze carries it away and the road ahead is empty again. The interaction is so brief, so unremarkable, that it barely registers in your conscious mind. It is simply another part of the road, like the milestone you passed an hour ago or the crow that flew overhead a few minutes later. The milestone you passed was one of the old ones, a cylindrical stone about waist height, with carved Latin letters that time and weather have worn almost smooth. You did not stop to read it, but your eyes caught the shape of the numbers even if your mind did not interpret them. The distance they marked was a known distance, a number you have carried in your bones since the first time you walked this route. You know that the journey from the coastal warehouse to the mountain village is a matter of days, not hours, and that each day has its own rhythm, its own set of landmarks and resting places. The milestones are just confirmations, reminders that the road continues as it always has, unchanged and dependable. You pass another one now, this one slightly tilted where the ground has settled underneath it, its shadow a sharp diagonal line across the stone. A small tuft of grass grows at its base, and a single yellow wildflower nods in the breeze. You step around it without breaking pace, and it is behind you. The landscape shifts again as you enter a region of mixed cultivation, where small plots of vegetables and herbs are interspersed with orchards of almond and fig trees. The air here carries a faint sweetness, the scent of ripe figs and the earthy aroma of turned soil. A woman and a child are working in one of the plots, the woman bending to pull weeds, the child carrying a basket of something green. They do not look up as you pass, absorbed in their task, and the sound of their voices, a low murmur of instruction and response, drifts across the road and then is gone. The road dips slightly into a hollow where a small stream crosses underneath a stone bridge. The bridge is a simple arch, no more than 10 paces long, its stones covered with a thin layer of green moss on the shaded side. You stop here, as you often do, and lead the mules down a small gravel path to the water's edge. The stream is narrow and clear, running over a bed of smooth pebbles that are grey, brown, and white. The mules lower their heads and drink, their muzzles creating small ripples that spread outward and break against the bank. You cup your hands and drink as well, the water cold and tasting of minerals, and you fill your water skin until it bulges slightly, the leather cool and damp. Then you stand for a moment, letting the mules graze on a patch of clover that grows beside the stream. The sound of the water is gentle, a constant, soft babbling that blends with the rustle of the mules chewing. A dragonfly hovers over the stream, its wings a blur of iridescent blue, and then it darts away upstream. You feel the sun on your neck and the coolness of the water in your stomach, and you're content in the way that an animal is content, without thought or expectation. After a time that is neither long nor short, you click your tongue, and Cyrus lifts his head, water dripping from his chin. You lead the mules back up to the road, and the walking resumes. The sun is now approaching its midpoint, and the shadows have shrunk until they are puddles of darkness directly under your feet. The heat is not oppressive, but it is present, a gentle weight on your shoulders that you accept as part of the day. You think about the bread and cheese in your pack, and you decide that you will stop for a proper meal when you reach the shrine that sits on a small plateau about halfway up the first real slope of the mountains. That is still some miles ahead, but the thought of it sits comfortably in your mind as you walk, a small anticipation that gives a pleasant shape to the hours ahead. The road begins to climb more noticeably now, and the basalt paving gives way for a longer stretch to a surface of crushed white limestone that crunches underfoot like snow. The sound is different from the clop of stone, a softer, grinding noise that is less sharp and more continuous. The mule's hooves leave small white prints on the darker stone where the limestone dust has settled, a trail that will be washed away by the next rain. To your right, the land falls away into a shallow valley where a stream, larger than the one you just crossed, meanders through a meadow of dry grass. A pair of white birds, egrets perhaps, stand motionless in the shallow water, and their reflections are perfectly mirrored on the still surface. You watch them for a few steps, and then the road turns, and they are hidden by a fold in the land. The scene is replaced by a view of a distant farmhouse, its walls a warm ochre color, its roof of terracotta tiles, and a thin column of smoke rising from its chimney. You imagine the family inside, preparing their midday meal, and the image is as calm and unremarkable as all the other images of the day. The pack saddles creak in their familiar rhythm, a sound that has been with you since the warehouse door. The smaller mule exhales a long breath, and her nostrils flare briefly, revealing the pink skin inside. A few flies have appeared, attracted by the warmth of the animals, and they buzz lazily around the mule's ears. Cyrus flicks his ear to shoo them, a quick, automatic movement, and then his ear is still again. You brush a fly away from your own face, feeling the tiny tickle of its legs, and then you forget about it. The walking continues. The road climbs a little more steeply, and you feel the effort in your calves now, a mild burning sensation that is familiar and almost pleasant. Your breathing deepens, your chest expanding more fully, and your pace slows to match the grade. The mules are breathing a little harder too, their sides moving in and out with a steady rhythm, but they are strong and well fed, and they show no sign of tiring. You speak to them in a low voice, just a few words. "Steady now, steady," and Cyrus flicks an ear in acknowledgement. The scrubland on either side of the road is changing again, the vegetation becoming denser and more varied. There are clumps of wild rosemary and thyme, their strong herbal scent released when your legs brush against them. There are small gnarled oaks with leaves of a dusty green, and there are bushes with tiny purple flowers that you cannot name. The bird calls are different here, more musical, with trills and whistles that echo from the trees. A hoopoe, with its striking crest of black and white, lands on a rock ahead, bobbing its head, and then flies away in a flutter of striped wings. You watch it go, and then return your gaze to the road. The plain is now behind you, still visible if you turn around, but fading into a hazy patchwork of greens and browns. Ahead, the mountains are clearer, their forested slopes rising in a series of ridges that overlap like the folds of a blanket. The road you are on is a pale scratch on the nearest ridge, winding upward through the trees, and you know that you will be among those trees before the sun reaches its highest point. The sense of space has shifted. On the plain you felt exposed, the sky a vast dome above you, the horizon an unbroken circle. Here, in the transitional zone between plain and mountain, you feel enclosed in a different way, not by walls, but by the rising land itself, which cradles the road and holds it in a shallow bowl of hills. The sky is still wide, but it is now framed by the slopes, and the sun feels closer, more direct. You loosen your tunic further and wipe a bead of sweat from your temple with the back of your hand. The salt on your skin mixes with the dust from the road, leaving a faint white residue on your fingers, and you rub them together, feeling the fine grit. It reminds you of the salt sacks still rocking gently on the mules' backs, and you turn to check them once more. The lashings are tight, the linen clean and dry, the loads perfectly balanced. You face forward again and continue. The road levels out for a short distance on a natural terrace, a shelf of land that overlooks the valley you have been climbing out of. You stop here without intending to, not for any reason, but that the view is wide and the ground is flat, and it seems right to pause. You plant your staff in the soft earth and stand still, your hands resting on its top. The mule stops behind you, and Surus lowers his head to sniff at a patch of dry grass, though he does not eat. The smaller mule stands motionless, her eyes half closed, her tail swishing slowly. Below you, the plain stretches out like a map, the road a thin line cutting straight across it. The coastal salt flats a pale shimmer in the far distance where the sea meets the land. You can just make out the cluster of buildings that is the warehouse and the lodging house, tiny as a child's toy. The sight does not fill you with any particular emotion. It is simply a view of where you were this morning, and now you are here. You stay for perhaps 100 heartbeats, and then you pull your staff from the earth and begin walking again. The mules follow. The road begins its final ascent toward the forest, and the air grows cooler as the elevation increases. The sound of the wind, which was absent on the plain, now makes itself known as a soft sighing through the scattered trees. The limestone surface gives way to a path of packed earth and pine needles, and the sound of your footsteps and the mule's hooves becomes muffled, almost silent. You are entering the edge of the trees where the sunlight falls in patches and the shadows are deep and cool. The scent of pine resin fills the air, a sharp, clean smell that clears your head. You look up at the canopy of green needles and you see the sky through the gaps, a pale blue mosaic. The road ahead is dappled with light and shade, and you step into the first pool of shadow, feeling the temperature drop by a degree. This is the threshold you've been walking toward all morning, and now you cross it without ceremony, your staff ticking against a root that has pushed through the path, the mule's harnesses jingling softly. The forest closes around you, and the coastal plain is left behind, though you do not look back to say goodbye. The road softens underfoot as you pass fully into the shade of the first large trees, and the change is so gradual that you do not notice the exact moment when the open sky gives way to a canopy of leaves. One step is on packed limestone gravel with the sun warm on your shoulders, and then many steps later you realize that the ground is now a carpet of old pine needles, and the light has become green and filtered. The mule's hooves make a different sound here, a muffled thud instead of a sharp clop, and the dust that rose in small puffs on the open road no longer rises at all. The air itself feels thicker and cooler, as if you have walked into a room that has been closed up for a long time, and it carries a scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and something sweet from the resin of the pines. You breathe it in slowly, and your lungs accept it without comment. The trees on either side are a mix of oak and chestnut, their trunks wide and rough, their bark deeply furrowed with vertical lines that catch the light and shadow in long stripes. Some of the oaks are very old, their lower branches spreading horizontally for many feet before turning upward, and their leaves are a dark, glossy green that rustles with a dry sound when a breeze passes through the higher branches. The chestnuts are younger and smoother, with leaves that are larger and paler, and you can see the spiky green husks of last year's nuts still lying on the ground among the fallen leaves. The ground itself is uneven, covered with a thick layer of leaf litter that has accumulated over many seasons, brown and brittle on top, darker and softer underneath. Your sandals sink into it slightly with each step, and the mules leave a trail of shallow impressions that fills slowly with tiny shadows. There are stones scattered about, some covered with a bright green moss that looks like velvet, others bare and grey with patches of pale lichen that spread in circles like maps of unknown countries. The road continues to climb, but the slope is gentler now, as if the mountain is taking its time to rise. It winds between the trees in long, lazy curves, never straight for more than 100 paces, so that you can only ever see a short distance ahead. The space feels enclosed and private, a world made of vertical trunks and horizontal branches, and the shifting light between them. The sun breaks through the canopy in isolated patches that move slowly across the forest floor as the branches sway, and when you step into one of these patches, you feel a momentary warmth on your skin, a brief reminder of the open plain before you step back into the cool shadow. The mules move through these pools of light, as if they are walking through a quiet, slow dance of sun and shade, their brown coats glowing briefly and then returning to the muted colors of the forest. You adjust your woolen cloak, pulling it loosely around your shoulders. The temperature has dropped enough that the thin tunic alone is no longer quite sufficient, and the wool feels comfortable against your arms. You do not lace it tightly, you simply let it hang, the weight of the fabric a gentle presence. The mules seem to appreciate the cooler air as well, and their pace remains steady and unhurried. Cyrus flicks his ears periodically, picking up sounds that you cannot hear, and the smaller mule occasionally blows a puff of air through her nostrils, a soft, rhythmic sound like a very quiet bellows. The salt sacks creak in their harnesses with the same familiar sound they have made since the warehouse, and you have grown so used to it that it has become a kind of silence in itself, a background note that merges with the sounds of the forest. A woodpecker begins tapping somewhere off to your left, a rapid series of knocks that echoes through the trees. The sound is sharp and distinct, a percussive rattle that stops as suddenly as it began, leaving a hole of quiet that is quickly filled by the soft rustle of leaves and the distant call of another bird. A thrush, perhaps, with a song of 3 descending notes. You turn your head slightly toward the sound, but do not stop walking, and the woodpecker does not resume its work. The forest absorbs the noise and returns to its steady, low hum of small sounds, the creak of a branch, the scuttle of a hidden creature in the undergrowth, the faint buzz of an insect. You listen to all of it without focusing on any single part, and the sounds become a continuous soothing texture like the grain of a piece of wood. The road dips into a shallow hollow where a small spring emerges from between 2 moss-covered boulders. The water trickles out of a crack in the rock and falls into a natural basin that has been worn smooth over countless years, and then it overflows in a thin silver thread that runs across the path and disappears into the leaf litter on the downhill side. The spring is a familiar stopping point, one that you have known since your first journey along this road, and you always pause here even if the mules do not need water. Today you stop, planting your staff in the soft earth and letting the mules find their own way to the pool. Cyrus lowers his head and drinks, his large lips barely disturbing the surface, and the smaller mule does the same, their 2 muzzles side by side. You watch the water flow from the rock, noticing how it catches the light and sparkles briefly, before becoming clear and invisible again. The sound of the spring is a constant, gentle trickle, a sound that has been here long before the road was built, and will be here long after you are gone. You kneel down on the damp stone and splash a handful of water onto your face, feeling the cold bite against your skin, and then you drink from your cupped palms. The water tastes faintly of stone and roots, a clean, mineral flavor that leaves your mouth feeling fresh. You fill your water skin, holding it under the stream until it bulges, and then you push the wooden stopper in firmly and stand up again. While the mules drink, you let your eyes wander over the details of the clearing. The boulders that frame the spring are covered with different kinds of lichen, some a pale grey-green that looks like dried paint, others a bright orange that stands out vividly against the dark stone. The lichen grows in irregular patches, spreading slowly year by year, and you notice a place where a piece has flaked away, revealing the raw rock underneath. A fern grows from a crevice in the larger boulder, its fronds arching outward in a graceful curve, and tiny drops of water cling to its tips where the spray from the spring has landed. The ground around the spring is muddy and churned by the hooves of many animals that have come here to drink, and you see the small cloven prints of deer and the larger, rounder prints of boar. The prints are fresh, perhaps from the night before, and you imagine the animals moving silently through the dark forest while you were still on the plain. The thought passes through your mind and is gone. After a few minutes, you click your tongue, and the mules lift their heads, water dripping from their chins. You resume your position at the head of Surus and step back onto the path, your staff making a soft squelch in the damp ground before you reach the drier leaves. The road continues upward on the other side of the hollow, and the trees change again as you climb. The oaks become less frequent and the chestnuts more numerous, their trunks lighter in color and their leaves forming a higher, thinner canopy that lets more light reach the forest floor. The undergrowth here is denser, with thickets of hazel and wild rose that crowd close to the path, their branches sometimes reaching out to brush against your tunic. The wild roses are in bloom, small pink flowers with 5 petals and a faint sweet scent that you catch only when you pass very close. A few bees move among the flowers, their buzzing a low, drowsy sound that rises and falls as they fly from blossom to blossom. You watch one bee crawl inside a flower and then back out, its body dusted with yellow pollen, before it flies away to another bush. The light continues to shift as the sun moves higher, and the patches of brightness on the path become smaller and more scattered. The forest feels deeper now, more remote, though you know that the road is never far from the edge of the wood. You cannot see the sky clearly through the leaves, only fragments of blue that appear and disappear as the branches move, and this gives the whole forest a sense of being enclosed in a large, quiet room with a ceiling made of living green. The air smells different here, less of pine and more of the damp, rich odor of decomposing leaves and the faint, spicy fragrance of wild mushrooms. You see a cluster of mushrooms growing at the base of a chestnut tree, their caps a pale tan with darker gills underneath, and you step around them without breaking stride. The mules do not notice them at all. The road levels out for a stretch on a narrow shelf of land where the trees thin out slightly, and you can see down into a ravine that runs parallel to the path. The ravine is deep and shaded, its bottom hidden by a tangle of ferns and fallen logs, and the sound of running water rises from somewhere far below, a distant, echoing murmur that blends with the wind in the leaves. You stop for a moment at the edge of the shelf, not to rest, but simply to look, and the mules stop behind you. The view into the ravine is a study in greens, the dark green of the ferns, the lighter green of the moss on the rocks, the grey-green of the lichen, the black green of the deep shadows where the sun never reaches. A butterfly, pale yellow and very small, floats up from the ravine and passes in front of your face before drifting away into the trees. You follow it with your eyes for a moment and then turn back to the road. The mules shake their heads gently, their harnesses jingling, and then you walk on. The path narrows slightly where a large chestnut tree has fallen across it, though the trunk has been cleared away long ago, leaving only a gap in the undergrowth and a section of disturbed earth. New saplings are already growing in the space where the old tree stood, their leaves bright and tender, and you step over a section of rotting root that still protrudes from the ground. The mules navigate the obstacle without difficulty, their hooves finding sure footing on the uneven ground, and soon you are back on the smooth path of needles and leaves. The woodpecker begins tapping again, this time closer, and you catch a glimpse of its black and white plumage as it hitches up the trunk of an oak. It hammers at the bark in short, sharp bursts, pausing between each burst, as if listening for the movement of insects inside. You watch it for a few steps and then lose sight of it behind a tree trunk. The forest is full of these small, quiet dramas that you observe without interfering. A squirrel runs along a branch overhead, its tail streaming behind it like a plume of grey smoke, and it leaps from one tree to another with a rustle of leaves. The mules ignore it completely. A jay shrieks somewhere in the distance, a harsh metallic call that is answered by another jay even farther away. The sound is the loudest thing you've heard since entering the forest, but it fades quickly and the quiet returns. You think about how long this forest has been here, how many travelers have walked this same road, how many springs have trickled from the same rock. The thoughts are not heavy or profound. They are simply the kind of thoughts that come when you are walking alone in a quiet place with nothing to do but put one foot in front of the other. Your body settles into a rhythm that is slower than the pace you kept on the plain, a rhythm that matches the unhurried atmosphere of the woods. Your legs move with a steady, mechanical regularity. Your arms swing slightly at your sides, and your breathing is deep and even. You feel the slight burn in your calves from the continuous climb, but it is a background sensation, like the creak of the saddle or the jingle of the harness. The staff in your hand meets the ground at regular intervals, a soft thud that punctuates the rhythm without interrupting it. You become aware of the weight of your own body, the way your feet press into the earth and push off again, the way your spine flexes slightly with each step, the way your shoulders move in their sockets. It is a pleasant awareness, a feeling of being fully inside your own skin, and you let it continue without examination. The road bends to the left and then to the right in a series of gentle switchbacks that carry you higher up the slope. The trees change again, and now you are walking through a stand of tall, straight pines with trunks that are bare for the first 20 feet, their crowns high above like a green roof. The ground under the pines is covered with a thick layer of reddish-brown needles that crunches softly underfoot, and the air has a sharp, clean scent of resin that is almost medicinal. The light under the pines is dimmer, a soft, brownish twilight that makes the forest feel very old and very still. The mule's hooves make a continuous swishing sound as they push through the needles, and their breath steams slightly in the cool air, even though it is now midday. You pull your cloak a little tighter and continue walking. In a small clearing between the pines you see a pile of stones that someone has stacked into a rough pyramid, a marker of some kind, though you do not know its purpose. The stones are covered with a thin layer of green moss, and a small plant with tiny white flowers grows out of a crack between two of them. The clearing around the marker is open to the sky, and a shaft of sunlight falls directly onto the stones, making the moss glow with a bright emerald light. You pause for a moment, letting the warmth of the sun fall on your face, and the mules stand motionless behind you. The quiet in the clearing is almost complete, broken only by the faint whisper of the wind in the pine needles high above. Then you step back into the shadow of the trees, and the clearing is behind you, just another small place on a long road. You begin to think about food, not with hunger, but with a gentle anticipation. The bread and cheese in the pack saddle will taste good when you stop, and the dried figs will be sweet and chewy. You picture the shrine where you plan to eat, a little niche in a rock with a terracotta figure and a flat stone to sit on. You know it is still some distance ahead, perhaps another hour of walking, and you do not rush. The thought of the shrine sits in your mind like a friendly companion, giving a shape to the hours that remain before the sun reaches its peak. You do not count the distance in miles, but in landmarks, the spring you have already passed, the ravine you have already seen, and now the long stretch of pine forest will eventually open out onto the rocky slopes where the shrine is located. Each landmark is a quiet confirmation that you are where you should be, that the road continues as it always has. The mules are patient and steady, their presence a constant comfort. Cyrus has a small white mark on his left ear that you have never noticed before, a tiny patch of lighter hair shaped like a crescent moon. You notice it now because your eyes are roaming idly over its form as you walk beside him. The smaller mule has a similar mark on her right flank, a wall of hair that grows in a different direction from the rest. These small details are new to you, even after all the journeys you have made together, and you wonder why you have never seen them before. Perhaps you have never looked closely enough, or perhaps you have simply forgotten. It does not matter. The marks are there, and you note them. And then your eyes move on to other things, the pattern of the bark on a chestnut tree, the shape of a particular stone, the way a branch hangs over the path at exactly head height, so that you have to duck slightly to pass under it. The road descends very slightly into a dip where a small stream crosses the path, no more than a trickle of clear water running over a bed of smooth pebbles. You do not stop because the mules are not thirsty, but you walk through the stream carefully, the water splashing around your ankles and soaking the hem of your tunic. The cold water feels refreshing on your skin, and you wiggle your toes in your sandals, enjoying the sensation. The mules walk through without pause, their hooves making a wet, sucking sound as they pull out of the mud on the far side. The stream continues its journey downhill, and you continue yours uphill. After the stream, the trees begin to thin out slightly, and you catch glimpses of the sky through larger gaps in the canopy. The clouds are still absent, and the sky is a clear, pale blue that suggests the afternoon will be warm. You can see the outline of the next ridge ahead, a dark shape of trees and rock that rises above the current slope, and you know that the shrine is somewhere on a shelf of land just below that ridge. The road will carry you there without hurry, one step at a time. You do not try to see it from here, you simply walk. The sounds of the forest continue their quiet symphony. A bird calls with a long descending whistle, and another answers with a trill. The wind moves through the leaves in a wave, a sound like distant surf, and then it dies away and the forest is still again. The woodpecker has stopped its tapping, and the squirrel has disappeared. The only sounds are your footsteps, the mule's hooves, the creak of leather, and the steady rhythm of your own breathing. You are aware of the passage of time, but you do not measure it. The sun moves across the sky, and the patterns of light on the forest floor shift accordingly. You move with them, a part of the landscape for a few hours, as anonymous and transient as the deer that came to the spring last night. The road stretches on, patient and endless, and you walk it as you have always walked it, with the salt sacks rocking on the mules' backs, and the staff in your hand, and the forest quiet all around. The pines begin to space themselves farther apart, their dense shade giving way to a lighter, more open woodland, where the sun reaches the ground in broad, uninterrupted sheets of gold. The road straightens and levels, and you feel the grade ease beneath your feet, the subtle release of effort that tells you the climb has paused. Your legs welcome the change without your mind needing to comment on it, and your pace adjusts accordingly, becoming fractionally longer and more relaxed. The mules notice too, and Suras lets out a long breath through his nostrils, a soft, fluttering sound that expresses nothing in particular. The smaller mule shakes her head, making the iron rings on her harness jingle with a brief musical clatter, and then she settles back into her steady walk. Through the thinning trees, you begin to see open sky ahead, a pale blue expanse that signals a break in the forest cover. The road makes one final curve around a large boulder that someone long ago decided not to move, leaving the path to bend around it like water around a stone in a stream. And then the trees fall away entirely, and you step out onto a wide shelf of level ground. The sudden openness after so many hours under the canopy is almost startling, though you do not startle. You simply stop walking, and let your eyes adjust to the brightness. The mules stop behind you, their heads lifting slightly as if they too were taking in the new space. The shelf is a natural terrace cut into the side of the mountain, a flat platform of pale limestone that juts out from the slope like a balcony. The stone underfoot is worn smooth by the passage of countless travelers, and small tufts of hardy grass grow in the cracks where water sometimes pools. On three sides, the land drops away into a valley that spreads out below like a rumpled green cloth, its folds and creases softened by distance. The fourth side is the mountain itself, rising up in a series of low cliffs and rocky outcrops, and it is here, at the base of the largest outcrop, that the shrine stands. You see it immediately, a small niche cut into the living rock. Its presence as familiar as the warehouse door or the spring in the hollow. The shrine is a simple thing, no larger than a cupboard, with a shallow arch carved above it and a flat stone ledge at the bottom that serves as an altar. Inside the niche stands a terracotta figure about the height of your forearm, a crude but recognizable image of a protective spirit, its features worn soft by weather and time. The figure wears a small cap and holds a staff in one hand, and its face has an expression that is neither stern nor kind, but simply present, as if it has been watching the road for so long that all expression has worn away. At its feet lies a small earthenware bowl containing a few dried flowers that have turned brown and brittle, their petals curling inward like tiny sleeping creatures, and beside the bowl rests a single bronze coin whose original color has long since surrendered to a mottled green patina. The whole shrine is no more than a minor interruption in the vastness of the rock face, but it has a quiet gravity that makes you stop and stand still for a moment before going about the business of the midday rest. You lead the mules to a patch of level ground near the shrine where the grass grows thicker, and a few flat stones have been arranged in a rough semicircle by previous travelers. You plant your staff in a crack between two stones so that it stands upright on its own, and then you turn to the mules. The unloading of the feed bags is a slow, practiced ritual that you perform without thought. You loosen the leather straps on the smaller mule's pack saddle first, lifting the top bag free and setting it on the ground. The grain inside rustles softly, a dry, papery sound that makes both mules prick their ears forward. You take out two wooden feed bags, simple troughs hollowed from a single piece of beechwood and worn smooth along the rims, and you pour a measure of barley and oats into each one, the grains falling in a pale stream that clatters gently against the wood. You set one bag before Surus and one before the smaller mule, and they lower their heads to eat with the same steady, grinding motion they have used 1,000 times before, their jaws moving in slow circles and their teeth making a soft crunching sound that blends with the whisper of the wind across the terrace. With the mules occupied, you turn to your own meal. You find a flat stone near the shrine that is just the right height for sitting, its surface warm from the morning sun, and you lower yourself onto it with the easy, unthinking motion of a body accustomed to resting wherever it finds itself. You reach into the supply sack and unwrap the bundle of food, the bread, the cheese, the handful of dried figs. The bread is a round, flat loaf with a hard brown crust that crackles slightly when you break it, revealing a dense, chewy interior, the color of pale sand. The cheese is firm and slightly crumbly, its surface slick with a faint sheen of oil, and it smells sharp and pleasant. The dried figs are dark and wrinkled, their skins dusted with a fine white bloom of natural sugar, and when you bite into one, it gives way with a slight resistance before revealing the sweet, seedy interior. You eat slowly, taking small bites and chewing thoroughly, your eyes wandering across the view while your jaw works in a steady rhythm, not unlike that of the mules. The valley below you is a patchwork of tiny fields and scattered farmhouses, their red tile roofs no larger than your thumbnail from this height. Threads of pale smoke rise from a few of the chimneys, standing almost vertical in the still midday air before dispersing into a faint haze that blurs the farthest ridges. You can see a river winding through the valley floor, a thin silver ribbon that catches the sunlight and throws it back in sharp glints, and you can see the darker green lines of cypress trees marking the boundaries between properties. A cart moves slowly along the road on the other side of the valley, so distant that it appears to be crawling, and the faintest sound of its wheels reaches you only if you hold your breath and listen carefully. The scene is so still and so complete that it might be a painting, and you look at it without any sense of ownership or desire, simply taking it in as part of the rest. The sun is directly overhead now, or nearly so, and its light falls straight down onto the stone terrace, leaving almost no shadows. The warmth is comfortable rather than oppressive, and it seeps through your tunic and into your shoulders, loosening the small knots of tension that have accumulated during the morning's walk. You feel a pleasant drowsiness settling over you, a heaviness in your eyelids that makes the edges of your vision go slightly soft. You blink slowly, and the motion of your eyelids feels like the slow closing of a heavy curtain. The mules have finished their grain and are now standing motionless, their heads lowered and their eyes half closed, the very picture of animal contentment. Surus shifts his weight onto 3 legs, letting the 4th rest with just the tip of his hoof touching the ground, and his tail swishes once and then is still. The smaller mule has found a patch of sun and stands in it with her coat glowing a warm reddish brown. You do not sleep. The rest is not about sleep, but about stillness, about letting the body pause while the mind drifts without direction. You sit on the warm stone and let your thoughts wander where they will, which is nowhere in particular. You think about the salt sacks still tied securely to the pack saddles, and the thought is a simple fact without any attached concern. You think about the road ahead, the high pass that you will cross tomorrow, and the thought is a shape without any attached urgency. You think about the terracotta figure in its niche, the unknown hands that shaped it, the unknown travelers who left the dried flowers and the bronze coin, and the thought is a curiosity without any attached need for answers. All these thoughts rise and fall like small waves on a still pond, leaving no trace behind them. A small bird lands on the edge of the shrine, a little brown sparrow with a pale stripe above its eye. It cocks its head and looks at you with one bright black eye, and then it hops down to the altar and pecks at the dried flowers, finding nothing of value. It stays for a moment longer, its tiny chest rising and falling with rapid breaths, and then it flies away into the trees with a whir of wings. You watch it go, and then let your gaze drift back to the valley. The air on the terrace has a different quality from the forest air, drier and thinner, with a faint herbal scent from the wild thyme and sage that grow in the cracks of the limestone. A light breeze moves across the shelf, just enough to stir the loose hairs on your forehead and cool the skin beneath, and it carries with it the distant sound of goat bells, a faint irregular clanking that comes from somewhere higher up the mountain. The sound is so far away that it seems to belong more to the sky than to the earth, and you listen to it without searching for its source. The breeze dies away, and the bells fade with it, and the silence that follows is deep and complete. After a long time you reach for the water skin and drink, the liquid now cool from resting in the shade of the pack saddle. You drink slowly, letting the water fill your mouth before you swallow, and you feel it travel down your throat and into your stomach with a cool, spreading sensation. You pour a little water into your palm and splash it onto your face, wiping away the fine dust that has settled on your skin during the walk, and you dry your face on the edge of your cloak. The small act of washing makes you feel refreshed without making you feel awake, which is exactly the balance that a midday rest requires. You glance at the sun, gauging the time by its position rather than by any pressing schedule. It has moved only slightly since you sat down, a hand's breadth at most, and you know that there is no need to hurry. The road will still be there when you stand up, and the pass will still be there tomorrow, and the village will still be there the day after. You let your gaze fall back to the shrine, and for a while you simply look at the terracotta figure, its small warm face, its patient posture, the way the light falls across its shoulders and leaves its eyes in shadow. The figure asks nothing of you, expects no offering, requires no prayer. It is simply there, as it has been for decades or centuries, watching the same valley, the same sky, the same road. You feel a quiet kinship with it, a sense of shared stillness that is too mild to be called an emotion. It is more like a recognition, one traveler acknowledging another. Eventually the drowsiness begins to recede, and the stillness of the rest gives way to the quiet readiness to continue. You stand up from the flat stone, your legs a little stiff from sitting, and you stretch your arms above your head with a slow, deliberate motion that makes your spine crack softly. You gather the remains of your meal, the crumbs of bread, the rind of cheese, and you scatter them at the edge of the terrace where the birds will find them later. The dried figs are all gone, their sweetness still lingering on your tongue. You fold the cloth that wrapped the food and tuck it back into the supply sack. Then you walk over to the mules and pick up the wooden feed bags, shaking out the last few grains and stowing them away. You check the lashings on the salt sacks, pulling each strap to confirm it is tight, and you find everything in order. The mules have roused themselves from their doze and are watching you with mild interest, their ears rotating forward and back. Surus blows a soft breath through his nose, and you reach up to scratch the white star on his forehead, feeling the coarse hair and the warm bone beneath. His ear flicks toward your hand and then away. Before you leave the shrine, you pause in front of the niche and look at it one more time. There is no obligation to leave an offering, but you find yourself reaching into the small leather pouch that hangs from your belt, a pouch that holds a few bronze coins and a flint for starting fires. You take out a coin and place it in the earthenware bowl, where it lands with a soft click against the older, greener coin that already rests there. The act is not religious, or at least not in any formal sense. It is simply a gesture of acknowledgement, a way of marking that you were here, that you passed through, that you rested and were grateful for the rest. The terracotta figure does not react, of course, and you do not expect it to. You turn away and pick up your staff from where it stands, wedged between the stones. You click your tongue softly, and the mules come to attention, their heads lifting and their ears swiveling forward. You take your place at the head of Surus, and the smaller mule falls into line behind him as naturally as water flows downhill. The road continues across the stone terrace and then narrows again at the far end, where it re-enters the forest and begins the next stage of its climb toward the pass. You walk toward that narrow point, your staff ticking against the limestone, and as you leave the terrace you feel the change in the air, the temperature dropping slightly as the shade of the trees enfolds you once more. The shrine remains behind you on its shelf of rock, the terracotta figure still watching the valley, the bronze coin still resting in its bowl, and nothing has changed except that you have moved on. The forest on the far side of the terrace is different from the one you walked through in the morning, though the difference is subtle. The trees here are older, their trunks thicker and more widely spaced, and the undergrowth is less dense, as if the forest floor has been swept clean by generations of falling needles and leaves. The light is different too, a deeper shade of green that feels older and more settled. The road climbs gently, and you fall back into the rhythm of walking without effort, your body remembering the motion as if it had never stopped. The mules follow with the same steady patience, and the creak of the saddle leather and the soft thud of hooves on packed earth resume their quiet conversation. You do not look back at the shrine, not because you are indifferent, but because you know it will be there when you come this way again. The road is full of landmarks that wait for you, and the shrine is one of them, as constant as the spring in the hollow or the fallen chestnut tree, or the pile of stones in the pine forest. You carry it with you now, not as a memory, but as a quiet satisfaction, the feeling of having rested well and eaten well and having nowhere to be except exactly where you are. The afternoon stretches ahead of you, long and unhurried, and you walk into it with the same easy pace that has carried you this far. The salt sacks rocking gently on the mules' backs, and the forest closing around you like a familiar room. The road beyond the shrine does not resume its climb immediately. Instead it traces a long, level contour across the mountainside, as if it is gathering its strength before the steeper work ahead. The trees on this stretch are mostly ancient holm oaks, their trunks thick and gnarled, their leaves small and dark and leathery, shaped like holly leaves, but softer to the touch. They cast a dappled shade that moves slowly across the path as the breeze stirs the upper branches, and the ground beneath them is a mix of dry leaves and the small, hard acorns that have fallen in previous seasons and now lie half buried in the duff. The mule's hooves crush these acorns with an occasional sharp crack that punctuates the softer background of their steady footfalls. You walk at an even pace, your staff ticking against the occasional exposed root, and you feel the subtle change in the air that tells you the forest is about to open up. The change comes not all at once, but in stages, like the slow turning of a page. First the oaks become shorter and more twisted, their trunks leaning away from the prevailing wind that blows down from the peaks. Then gaps begin to appear between them, through which you can see patches of pale sky and the outlines of the higher ridges. The shade becomes intermittent, and the sun falls directly on the road for longer stretches, warming the stones until they radiate a gentle heat back up at your legs. The scent of dry leaves gives way to something sharper, a mineral dryness mixed with the resin of the last few pines that cling to the rocky soil. And then quite suddenly the trees are behind you and the road is climbing across open ground, a pale scar on the flank of the mountain that stretches upward in a series of long, shallow zigzags. The terrain here is made of limestone, the same pale grey stone that forms the shelf of the shrine, but now broken and exposed in ways that reveal its layered history. The road is cut directly into the side of the slope, with a steep wall of rock rising on your right and an equally steep drop falling away on your left. The wall to your right is not a single sheer cliff, but a series of low, uneven ledges and outcrops, some jutting out over the path, others receding into shallow cavities where small ferns grow in the perpetual shade. The rock is weathered into strange shapes, rounded hollows, and sharp ridges and delicate fins of stone that look as if they might crumble at a touch, though they have held their shape for centuries. Lichen paints the surface in patches of pale green and rusty orange, adding a muted color to the monochrome gray. On your left, the ground falls away into a steep slope covered with loose scree and scattered clumps of tough mountain grass, and below that, far enough to make your eye take a moment to measure the distance, the tops of pine trees rise like dark green clouds from the valley floor. The view is vast and open, but you do not linger on it. Your attention stays mostly on the ground in front of your feet. The surface of the road itself has changed. The smooth basalt paving stones that carried you across the plain are long gone, replaced here by a rough track of crushed limestone and angular broken rocks that shift underfoot. The stones are sharp-edged, pale grey, and occasionally flecked with tiny crystals that glint in the sunlight, and they make a dry, clinking sound when dislodged by your sandals. The sound is similar to the clatter of broken pottery, a high, brittle note that echoes faintly off the rock wall. The mule's hooves produce a deeper, more solid version of the same sound, a crunch and a clatter that you have come to know well over the years. You pick your steps with care, not because the path is dangerous, but because a misplaced foot on a loose stone can turn an ankle, and a turned ankle on a mountain road is an inconvenience best avoided. Your staff helps you test the larger stones before you commit your weight, and you lean on it slightly as you climb, letting it take some of the effort from your legs. The grade is steeper now than it has been at any previous point in the journey. You feel it in the way your calf muscles tighten with each step and release with each pause, in the way your breathing deepens to take in more of the thin air, in the way your heart beats with a slow, deliberate rhythm that you can feel in your temples if you pause to notice. You do not fight the steepness. You accept it and adjust your pace accordingly, walking more slowly and pausing more often, not to rest, but simply to let your body settle into the new demand. The mules adjust as well, their heads lowering slightly as they lean into the climb, their hooves picking their way across the loose stones with an instinctive care that requires no guidance from you. Surus chooses his own path through the roughest patches, and you have learned to trust his judgment, following in his footsteps rather than leading him. The smaller mule does the same, her shorter legs working faster but no less steadily, and her breathing comes in soft, rhythmic puffs that you can hear when you walk close beside her. The salt sacks sway on the pack saddles with a motion that is slightly different from the motion on level ground. The pitch of the climb changes the angle of the mules' backs, and the sacks lean forward just a little, their weight pressing against the front straps of the harness. You notice this and pause to check the lashings, not because anything is loose, but because you are in the habit of checking. You run your hand along the leather straps, feeling the familiar texture of the oiled hide, and you give each buckle a gentle tug. Everything holds firm. The linen of the sacks is warm from the sun and slightly gritty with dust, but there are no tears, no leaks, no sign of wear. You pat Surus on the flank and click your tongue, and he resumes his climb without hesitation. The air at this elevation is noticeably thinner, and it carries a dry, almost brittle quality that makes the inside of your nose feel clean and cool. There is less moisture in it, less of the green, living scent of the forest, and more of the bare mineral essence of the mountain itself. The dominant fragrance now is herbal, a blend of wild thyme and sage and a few other plants that you cannot name but recognize by their sharp, clean smell. The herbs grow in the cracks of the limestone, small woody shrubs with tiny grey-green leaves and pale purple flowers that nod in the breeze, and when your leg brushes against them, they release a burst of scent that lingers for a few steps before the wind carries it away. The wind itself is more constant up here, a steady, low-pressure flow that moves down from the peaks and across the slope, never strong enough to be called a wind, but persistent enough to make a soft sighing sound as it passes over the rock edges and through the sparse vegetation. You begin to hum a simple melody as you walk, more a vibration in your throat than a proper song. It has no name and no recognizable tune. It is just a series of notes that follow the rhythm of your footsteps, rising slightly when you step up onto a larger stone and falling when you step down into a shallow dip. The humming is not a conscious choice, but something your body does on its own, a way of filling the silence and marking time. The sound is low and resonant, barely audible over the crunch of stones and the creak of leather, and it blends so completely with the other sounds of the climb that after a while you no longer notice you are doing it. The mules do not seem to notice either, or if they do, they give no sign. The sun climbs higher as you climb higher, and its heat becomes more intense on the exposed slope. There are no trees to provide shade now, only the occasional overhang of rock that casts a narrow band of shadow across the path. When you pass through one of these shadows, you feel an immediate coolness on your skin, a brief respite that lasts for 3 or 4 steps before you emerge back into the full glare. You have tied your cloak to the pack saddle, and you walk in just your tunic, the wool fabric clinging slightly to your back where sweat has begun to gather. The sweat is not unpleasant. It is the honest sweat of physical work, and it cools you as the breeze passes over it. You take the water skin from your belt and drink, tilting your head back and letting the water flow into your mouth. It is no longer cold, but it is wet and clean, and it washes the dust from your throat. You offer some to the mules by cupping your hand and holding it under their noses, and they lick the water from your palm with rough, warm tongues. There is not enough in your hand to satisfy their thirst, but there will be a stream higher up where the road crosses a natural drainage, and you will stop there for a proper drink. A hawk appears in the sky above the ridge, circling slowly on an updraft that you cannot feel from the ground. Its wings are spread wide and motionless, the primary feathers splayed like fingers at the tips, and its body is a dark silhouette against the pale blue. It makes no sound, and its circles are so smooth and regular that it might be tracing an invisible spiral drawn on the sky. You stop for a moment to watch it, leaning on your staff and tilting your head back. The hawk banks slightly, adjusting its angle to the wind, and its shadow passes over the slope below you, a swift, dark shape that slides across the scree and disappears. The bird completes one more circle, and then drifts away over the ridge, and you lose sight of it behind the crest. You lower your gaze and continue walking, your staff resuming its steady tapping. The road takes a sharper turn at a place where a large outcrop of rock forces the path to swing wide. The turn is almost a hairpin, and the inner edge is marked by a pile of stones that previous travellers have stacked there, a small cairn that now stands about waist high. You add a stone to the pile as you pass, picking up a flat piece of limestone from the side of the road and setting it carefully on top. The stone fits neatly against the others, and the cairn remains stable. The act is another small gesture, like the coin at the shrine, a way of leaving a trace that will be invisible to anyone but yourself. The mules navigate the turn with practiced ease, their bodies bending into the curve, and then you are on the next straight stretch, facing a long diagonal traverse that climbs toward a notch in the ridge above. The limestone underfoot changes character again, becoming more fractured and uneven, with larger slabs of rock that have split along natural joints and now lie tilted at odd angles. You have to watch your footing more carefully here, stepping from one stable slab to the next and avoiding the smaller, looser stones that lie in the gaps. Your pace slows even further, and the rhythm of your walking becomes irregular, broken by short pauses and careful adjustments. The mules pick their way across the slabs with surprising delicacy, their large hooves finding purchase on surfaces that seem barely wide enough, and you feel a quiet admiration for their sure-footedness, though you do not put the feeling into words. You simply note it and move on. Halfway across the traverse you come to a small stream that crosses the path, the water emerging from a fissure in the rock wall on your right and flowing across the road before spilling over the edge on your left in a thin, silvery waterfall. The stream is narrow enough to step across, and the water is clear and shallow, running over a bed of smooth, dark pebbles that gleam under the surface. You stop here and let the mules drink, and you kneel beside the stream to refill your water skin, holding the opening under the flow until the leather bulges and the water spills over your fingers. You drink deeply, the water so cold that it makes your teeth ache faintly, and you splash some onto your face and the back of your neck. The cold is bracing, and it clears the small cobwebs of fatigue that had begun to gather at the edges of your awareness. You sit on a flat rock beside the stream for a short while, letting the mules graze on the tough grass that grows along the watercourse, and you watch the waterfall as it drops into the void on your left, the stream breaking into a mist of tiny droplets that catch the sunlight and create a brief, pale rainbow before vanishing into the depths. After the rest, you gather the mules and continue the climb. The road now begins a series of shorter, steeper switchbacks that carry you up the final pitch toward the notch. The rock wall on your right grows higher and more imposing, its surface pocked with small caves and ledges where tufts of dry grass sprout impossibly from bare stone. In one of these small caves you see the nest of some bird, a messy collection of twigs and dried moss wedged into a crevice, and you wonder idly what kind of bird would nest at this altitude, though you do not wander long enough to stop and look. The drop on your left becomes deeper, and the tops of the pine trees below now look like a soft green carpet rather than individual shapes. The breeze strengthens as you gain elevation, and it carries a new chill that reminds you that the high pass is not far ahead, though you will not cross it today. You feel the fatigue of the climb settling into your muscles, a pleasant heavy sensation that makes your limbs feel solid and grounded. The hours of walking have worked their way into your thighs and calves and the small of your back, and you are aware of each part of your body in a way that you were not this morning. It is not pain, but a kind of deep humming presence, a reminder that you have traveled far and climbed high. The mules show similar signs of effort. Their coats are damp along the flanks, and their breathing is deeper and more audible. But they are strong and well-conditioned, and they climb with the same patient determination they have shown all day. You speak to them occasionally, a few low words of encouragement, and they flick their ears in response. The light begins to change as the afternoon progresses, shifting from the harsh white glare of midday to a softer, warmer gold. The shadows grow longer and more defined, stretching across the road like dark banners, and the face of the rock wall takes on a honey-colored glow that makes the limestone look almost soft. The sky above the ridge is still a clear, cloudless blue, but in the distance over the valley you left behind, a faint haze is beginning to gather, a suggestion of the evening that will eventually come. You can see the notch in the ridge more clearly now, a V-shaped gap between two peaks that marks the high point of the pass, and you can see that the road will reach it by tomorrow afternoon, if the conditions remain fair. The final stretch of the day's climb brings you to a small, level area where the road briefly flattens out, before descending slightly into a sheltered hollow. This hollow is your destination for the evening, a place where travelers often camp because it offers a patch of grass, a trickle of water from another small spring, and a natural windbreak formed by a curved outcrop of rock. You can see the shepherd's hut in the distance, a low shape of dry stone walls and a turf roof, and you can see the thin trail of smoke rising from its chimney, a sign that the shepherd is there and that the evening fire is already lit. The sight is a welcome one, not because you are exhausted, but because it signals the end of the day's walking, the transition from movement to stillness. You slow your pace even further as you approach the hollow, letting the last few steps carry you gently into the place where you will rest, and the mules seem to understand, their heads lifting and their ears swiveling forward as they catch the scent of grass and water. You lead the mules to the level ground near the stream and begin the routine of unloading, your tired muscles moving with the same careful precision they had at dawn. You unstrap the salt sacks and stack them neatly under the shelter of the rock overhang, covering them with the oiled cloth to protect them from the dew. You remove the pack saddles and set them aside, rubbing the mules' backs where the leather has pressed against their coats, and you feel the warmth of their skin and the slight dampness of their sweat. They shake themselves, a full body shiver that starts at the head and travels down to the tail, and then they lower their heads to graze on the mountain grass. You fill the wooden feed bags one last time for the day and set them out, and the mules eat with the same slow, grinding contentment they always do. The sun is now low on the horizon, a great orange disk that paints the rock wall in shades of amber and rose, and the shadows have stretched until they touch the far side of the hollow. The air is cooling rapidly, and you pull your cloak from the pack and wrap it around your shoulders, grateful for its weight and warmth. You sit on a flat stone near the stacked salt sacks and look out across the valley, now filled with a blue-grey haze that softens every outline. The shepherd's hut glows faintly in the distance, its small window a square of warm orange light, and you know that soon you will walk over and share a bowl of whatever is cooking on the fire. But for now you simply sit, letting the day settle around you, feeling the deep, quiet tiredness in your bones, and the calm satisfaction of having climbed through the rocky terrain without hurry or incident. The stars will come out soon, and the night will be cold and still, and you will sleep under the open sky with the salt sack stacked beside you and the mule standing quietly in the dark. The hollow where you will spend the night is a wide, grassy bowl carved into the mountainside by some ancient movement of water or ice, its floor remarkably level and its sides rising gently to form a natural enclosure. The grass that covers the ground is short and tough, a mountain variety that grows in dense tufts and feels springy underfoot, as if you are walking on a thick wool rug laid over stone. The stream you saw from above runs along the far edge of the hollow, a narrow ribbon of clear water that slides over a bed of dark pebbles with a sound so soft and continuous that it becomes a kind of silence after you have listened to it for a while. The curved outcrop of rock that forms the windbreak stands at the northern edge, its face smoothed by centuries of weather, and beneath it the ground is bare and dry, a perfect place to stack the salt sacks. The shepherd's hut sits a short distance away on a slight rise. Its dry stone walls are mottled grey-brown, and its roof a thick layer of turf from which a few wildflowers sprout, their tiny yellow heads nodding in the evening breeze. A thin line of smoke rises from the hole in the centre of the roof, rising straight up for a few feet before the breeze catches it and pulls it apart into soft grey wisps that dissolve into the darkening sky. You lead the mules to the centre of the hollow and stop, planting your staff in the soft earth. The animals stand quietly while you begin the unloading, their sides still rising and falling with the deeper breathing of the climb, though the rhythm is already slowing as they recover. You untie the leather straps of Cyrus's pack saddle first, working the knots with fingers that are tired but still nimble, and you lift the first salt sack free, cradling it against your chest as you carry it to the shelter of the rock overhang. The sack is warm from the sun and the mule's body heat, and the coarse linen is rough against your arms. You set it down carefully on the bare earth, positioning it so that it will stay dry even if a stray breeze carries a mist from the stream, and then you return for the second sack. You repeat the process 4 times, once for each sack, and then you stack the 2 supply bags on top, making a neat, compact pile that you cover with the oiled cloth. The cloth is stiff and slightly tacky from its last treatment with linseed oil, and it crackles softly as you unfold it and drape it over the pile, weighing down the corners with small stones that you collect from the edge of the stream. With the salt sacks secured, you turn your attention to the mules. You unbuckle the pack saddles and lift them away, setting them on a flat rock where they will stay dry, and you run your hands over the animals' backs where the leather has pressed. The hair there is flattened and slightly damp, and you rub it gently with the heel of your palm to restore the circulation, feeling the warmth of their skin and the solid architecture of their spines beneath. Cyrus arches his neck and stretches his upper lip in a gesture that looks like a yawn, but is really a sign of contentment, and the smaller mule does the same, her eyes half closing with pleasure. You leave them to shake themselves, which they do with a full-body shudder that starts at the ears and ripples all the way to the tail, and then they lower their heads and begin to graze on the tough mountain grass, their teeth tearing the blades with a soft ripping sound. You take the wooden feed bags from the supply pack and pour a measure of grain into each one, the barley and oats cascading in a pale stream that glows briefly in the golden light. You set the bags on the ground a few paces apart so the mules can eat without crowding each other, and they move to them with the slow, deliberate steps of animals who know that their meal is secure and that there is no need to hurry. The sound of their chewing is steady and rhythmic, a grinding, crunching noise that blends with the trickle of the stream and the distant, intermittent clank of the shepherd's goat bell. You stand for a moment watching them, your hand resting on Cyrus's flank, and you feel the steady expansion and contraction of his ribs as he breathes, a reliable, living rhythm that has been beside you for every step of the journey. The light continues to change as the sun sinks lower, the gold deepening to amber and the amber deepening to copper, and the shadows stretch across the hollow until they touch the far wall of rock and begin to climb it. The air grows noticeably cooler, and the breeze that was merely fresh during the climb now carries a distinct chill that makes you glad of your woolen cloak. You pull it from the supply pack and wrap it around your shoulders, the heavy fabric settling over your arms and back with a comforting weight, and you fasten the simple bone toggle at the throat. The cloak smells of sheep and road dust, and the faint, clean scent of the mountain herbs you brushed against during the climb, a mixture that is familiar and grounding. You walk to the stream and kneel on a flat stone at its edge, the water flowing past just inches from your hands. You splash your face, the cold water shocking your skin and making you draw a sharp breath, and then you scrub your hands and forearms, rubbing away the dust and grit of the road. The water is so clear that you can see every detail of the pebble bed beneath, the individual stones in shades of grey and brown and white, their surfaces polished smooth by the endless flow. You cup your hands and drink, and the water tastes of stone and cold and the high, clean air of the mountain. You drink until your thirst is gone, and then you sit back on your heels and look across the hollow to where the shepherd's hut sends its thin column of smoke into the sky. The smoke carries a faint scent of burning wood, and beneath that the savory smell of something cooking. You walk slowly across the hollow toward the hut, your feet finding the flattest ground by instinct, and as you approach you see the shepherd sitting on a low stone bench beside the door. He is an older man, perhaps 60, with a face that is all lines and hollows, the skin tanned a deep brown, and the hair a grizzled grey that sticks out from under a felt cap. He wears a tunic of undyed wool and a cloak similar to yours, and his hands, which rest on his knees, are thick and knotted from years of work with stones and animals. He looks up as you approach and nods, a slow, deliberate dip of the chin that conveys welcome without requiring anything further. You nod back and sit on the ground a respectful distance from the door, your back against a large stone that still holds the warmth of the afternoon sun. For a while neither of you speaks, and the silence is comfortable, filled by the crackle of the fire inside the hut and the soft bleating of the goats that are penned in a small enclosure of dry stone walls behind the building. The goats are settling down for the night, their voices low and querulous, and you can hear the occasional thud of a hoof against the packed earth. The shepherd stirs and reaches inside the door of the hut, bringing out a clay bowl that he hands to you without ceremony. The bowl is warm in your hands, and inside it is a thick, lumpy stew of beans and wild greens, pale brown and steaming in the cooling air. There is no meat and no spice, just the simple earthy flavor of beans cooked slowly over a wood fire, and you eat it with the wooden spoon that the shepherd also provides, scooping up the stew and blowing on it gently before each mouthful. The warmth of the food spreads through your chest and stomach, and you feel the fatigue of the day's climb begin to soften and ease. In return, you break off a portion of your bread and a chunk of the hard cheese, handing them to the shepherd, who accepts them with a quiet grunt of thanks. He eats the bread slowly, tearing off small pieces and chewing them with the same deliberate rhythm with which he does everything else, and you sit together in the fading light, two men at the end of a long day, sharing food without the need for conversation. The sky above the hollow shifts through a spectrum of colors, from copper to rose to a deep, dusty purple, and the first stars begin to appear overhead, faint pinpricks of light that grow brighter as the sky darkens. After he finishes eating, the shepherd speaks, his voice a low rumble that sounds like stones shifting in a stream. He tells you that the road ahead is clear, that the pass is free of any fallen rock, and that the weather should hold for another 2 days at least. He tells you that a small flock of sheep will be moving along the same road tomorrow, but that they will not slow you down. You nod at each piece of information, filing it away without comment. The shepherd does not ask where you are going or where you have come from. He does not need to, because every traveller on this road is going to or from the same places, carrying the same goods, following the same rhythms. The road itself is the only story that matters, and you both know it by heart. The darkness gathers in the hollow, and the shepherd stands and retrieves a clay lamp from inside the hut, a simple bowl of oil with a floating wick that he lights with a twig from the fire. The flame is small and steady, a single point of orange light that pushes back the darkness just enough to see the ground in front of you. He sets the lamp on the stone bench and then retreats into his hut, pulling the wooden door closed behind him. A few minutes later, the glow from the chimney hole fades slightly as he banks the fire for the night, and then everything is still. You walk back to your camp slowly, your feet finding the now familiar contours of the hollow, and you check on the mules before settling down. They have finished their grain and are standing together near the stream, their heads lowered and their weight shifted onto 3 legs, the very picture of rest. Surus flicks an ear as you approach, and you run your hand along his neck, feeling the coarse hair and the warmth of his skin, before you turn away and leave them to their dozing. The salt sacks are as you left them, the oiled cloth secure and the stones in place, and nothing has disturbed them. You unroll your woolen blanket on a patch of level ground near the salt sacks, choosing a spot where a cushion of grass will soften the hardness of the earth. You use the pack saddle as a pillow, propping it at just the right angle so that your head is slightly elevated, and you lie on your back with your cloak pulled up to your chin. The ground beneath you is still faintly warm from the sun that fell on it all afternoon, and the heat seeps up through the blanket and into your tired muscles, loosening the last small knots of tension. You fold your hands over your chest and let your eyes drift shut for a moment, then open them again, not because you are restless, but because the sky above you is too beautiful to ignore. The stars are fully out now, and they are astonishingly clear at this altitude, thousands upon thousands of them scattered across the black dome of the sky, like grains of salt spilled on dark stone. You can see the great band of the Milky Way stretching from horizon to horizon, a river of pale light that is made of countless individual stars, too numerous to count, and you can see the constellations that you have known since childhood, their shapes standing out sharply against the darkness. There is no moon tonight, and the starlight alone is bright enough to cast faint shadows on the ground, a soft, silver luminescence that makes the grass and the rocks and the mules all glow with a ghostly light. The air is very still now, and the only sounds are the trickle of the stream and the occasional distant call of a night bird, a single plaintive note that hangs in the air for a moment and then fades. You lie there for a long time, not thinking, just watching the stars and feeling the slow, steady rhythm of your own breathing. The stars do not move in any way that you can see, but if you watch them long enough you can sense the slow rotation of the earth beneath you, carrying you and the mountain and the whole valley through the darkness toward another dawn. The thought is not a profound one, just a quiet observation, and it passes through your mind and is replaced by the simple awareness of the blanket against your skin and the weight of your cloak and the solid, reassuring presence of the mules standing nearby. The cold begins to creep in after a while, a thin, sharp cold that slips under the edges of your blanket and makes your cheeks and nose feel numb. You turn onto your side and curl your legs up slightly, pulling the cloak tighter around you, and the new position traps a pocket of warmth that slowly spreads through your body. The mules shift in the darkness, their hooves making soft thuds on the grass, and then they are still again. The stream continues its endless murmur, and the night bird calls once more, and then falls silent. You feel the tiredness settling over you like a heavy soft blanket, pulling you down toward sleep, and you let it come without resistance. The last thing you see before your eyes close is the line of the ridge against the stars, a dark, jagged silhouette that marks the high pass you will cross tomorrow. It stands there patiently, waiting for you, and you know that when you wake it will still be there, and the road will still be there, and the mules will still be there, and everything will continue as it always has. You let out a long, slow breath, and the sound of it mingles with the trickle of the stream and the whisper of the breeze, and then you drift away into a sleep that is deep and dreamless and full of the quiet peace of the mountain night. You wake to a cold that has settled deep into the hollow, a cold so sharp and clean that it feels like a blade laid gently against your cheek. For a moment you lie still, your body curled beneath the wool blanket and the heavier cloak, your breath making small clouds that rise and vanish in the darkness above your face. The stars are still out, though they have shifted their position since you last saw them, and the sky has that pale, transparent quality that comes just before the first hint of dawn. The air is perfectly still, and the silence is so deep that you can hear the blood moving in your ears, a faint, distant rushing like the sea remembered from a dream. You lie there for a little while longer, letting your body adjust to the idea of waking, and then you push the blanket aside and sit up, the cold air rushing in to claim the warm space where you had been lying. The grass around your sleeping spot is coated with a fine layer of dew that sparkles faintly in the starlight, each blade outlined in silver. Your blanket is damp on the outside where the dew has settled, and when you touch the wool it feels cool and slightly clammy. You stand up slowly, your joints stiff from the night on the ground, and you stretch your arms above your head with a long, deliberate motion that makes your spine pop in several places. The sound is small and sharp in the quiet air. You fold the blanket lengthwise and then roll it tightly, tucking it under your arm while you look around the hollow. The mules are standing where you left them, their heads now raised and their ears pricked forward, watching you with the calm, expectant expressions of animals who know the routine. Their breath steams in the cold air, twin plumes of white that rise and dissipate, and their coats are dusted with a fine silvery moisture that makes them look paler than they are. A mist has gathered in the hollow overnight, not a thick fog, but a delicate ground-hugging layer that reaches just to your knees. It moves very slowly, almost imperceptibly, swirling in lazy eddies as if the air itself is dreaming. The stream is still audible through the mist, its trickle muffled and softened, and the shepherd's hut is a dark, indistinct shape on its rise, the chimney hole now smokeless and the door still closed. The goats are silent, still sleeping, or perhaps just standing quietly in their pen. You take a few steps through the mist and feel it part around your legs, cool and slightly damp, leaving a faint trace of moisture on your skin. The sensation is not unpleasant, just different, another texture in the long catalogue of sensations that make up the journey. You walk to the rock overhang where the salt sacks are stacked, and you check them first, as you always do. The oiled cloth is still in place, the stones still weighing down the corners, and when you lift a corner of the cloth, you see that the linen sacks are dry and untouched. The salt inside makes its faint, familiar rustle when you press your hand against the fabric, a sound that has become as much a part of the journey as the creak of the saddles or the clop of the hooves. You let the cloth fall back and replace the stones, and then you turn to the task of loading the mules. The pack saddles are cold when you lift them from their rock, the leather stiff and unyielding, and you rub them between your hands for a moment to warm them and make them more pliable. Surus stands patiently while you swing the saddle onto his back, settling it into the familiar groove behind his shoulders, and you tighten the girth strap with slow, steady tugs, checking the fit by sliding 2 fingers between the leather and his belly. The smaller mule watches this process and then steps forward when it is her turn, presenting her back to you with the resigned cooperation of an animal who has been doing this work for many years. You load the salt sacks one by one, the cold linen rough against your hands, and you balance each load with the same careful attention you gave it in the warehouse, adjusting the position of the sacks until they hang evenly and the mule stands square and comfortable under the weight. The supply bags go on top, and you tie everything down with the extra cord, your cold fingers working the knots with a slowness that is not clumsiness, but deliberation. When the mules are loaded, you take a moment to eat, though it is less a meal than a ritual. You take a handful of dried figs from the supply bag and chew them slowly, the sweetness filling your mouth and the texture chewy and slightly grainy, giving your jaws something to do. You drink from the water skin, the water so cold that it makes your throat ache, and then you walk to the stream and refill the skin, holding it under the flow until the leather bulges. The stream is colder than it was last night, or perhaps you are simply colder, and the water numbs your fingers pleasantly. You shake the excess water from your hands and dry them on the hem of your tunic, and then you pick up your staff from where it leans against the rock overhang. The mist is still there when you lead the mules out of the hollow, though it has begun to thin just slightly at the edges, and the sky above it is now a deep, luminous blue rather than the black of full night. A few stars still linger near the western horizon, the brightest ones that hold on longest before the sun washes them away, and the eastern sky behind the ridge is starting to glow with a soft, pearly light that has no color yet, but promises color soon. You walk through the mist, your feet finding the familiar track of the road, and the mules follow you with their heads emerging from the white layer, like creatures wading through a still, silent sea. The cold air stings your cheeks and makes your eyes water slightly, and you pull your cloak tighter, hunching your shoulders against the chill. You know from experience that the walking will warm you soon enough, and that the sun, when it finally clears the peaks, will burn off the mist and turn the morning into something golden and mild. But for now you are in the cold, and the mist is all around you, and the world is reduced to the few feet of road visible ahead, and the sound of your footsteps and the mule's hooves on the damp stone. The road rises immediately from the hollow, resuming its climb toward the pass with the same steady, relentless grade as yesterday afternoon. The mist makes the climb feel different, though the slope is exactly the same. With the visibility so short you cannot see the switchbacks above you or the valley below, and so the climb becomes a series of small immediate tasks. Step onto this rock, step over that rut, lean into the grade, pause and breathe. The mule's hooves are muffled by the damp air, and their harness bells sound distant and strange, as if they are coming from somewhere else entirely. You find yourself listening to your own breathing, the steady in and out that has been your companion for so many miles, and you match your steps to its rhythm without thinking. After 100 paces or so, the mist begins to glow, a soft, diffuse light that seems to come from everywhere at once, and you know that the sun has risen above the eastern ridge, even though you cannot see it. The glow intensifies slowly, turning from pearl to pale gold, and the mist itself begins to thin, revealing first the larger shapes of rocks and bushes, and then the smaller details at the road surface and the lichen on the stones. You can see the switchback above you now, a pale line scratched into the dark rock, and you can see the drop on your left, still filled with a soft white cloud that looks solid enough to walk on, though you know it is nothing but air and water. The pines below the cloud are still invisible, and the effect is of standing on an island of rock in a sea of white, an image that you observe without attaching any special meaning to it. The sun breaks through the mist all at once, a sudden flood of golden light that turns every dewdrop into a prison, and every rock face into a sheet of pale fire. You squint against the brightness and raise a hand to shade your eyes, and the mules shake their heads as if to dislodge the light from their ears. The warmth of the sun is immediate and welcome, and you feel it on your shoulders and the back of your neck, loosening the tightness that the cold had put into your muscles. The mist retreats rapidly now, pulling back like a tide, and within a few minutes the valley below is visible again, its forests and fields emerging from the white blanket like islands from a receding sea. The shepherd's hut is a tiny dark dot in the hollow far below, and you can just make out the thread of smoke that means the shepherd is awake and has kindled his morning fire. You do not wave or call out, but you look at the hut for a moment before turning back to the climb. The road continues upward through the thinning mist, and now you can see the pass clearly. It is a V-shaped notch between two peaks, the highest point of the road before it begins its long descent into the eastern valleys, and it is closer than you expected. You can see the individual rocks that frame the notch, the pale limestone glowing in the morning sun, and you can see the way the road narrows as it approaches the summit, squeezed between two outcrops of dark stone that stand like gateposts. The sight gives a shape to the morning's effort, a visible goal that you will reach in another hour or so, and you adjust your pace slightly, not hurrying, but simply moving with a renewed sense of direction. The air at this elevation has a quality that is hard to describe, a kind of crystalline clarity that makes every sound sharper and every color more vivid. The rocks are not just grey, but 1,000 shades of grey and brown and ochre, each one distinct and individual. The sky is not just blue, but a deep, saturated blue that seems to press down on the peaks with a gentle, enormous weight. The silence between sounds is longer and deeper, and when a bird calls from somewhere on the ridge, its voice rings out like a single clear note from a flute, hanging in the air for a long moment before fading. You walk through this clarity with the mules behind you, and you feel as though you are walking through the very top of the world, a place where the air is too thin for ordinary concerns. The last stretch before the pass is a straight, steep ramp of broken stone that leads directly to the notch. You pause at its base and look up, gauging the distance and the effort it will require, and then you begin to climb. Your breathing deepens again, and your calves burn with the familiar, almost pleasant ache of hard work. The mules lean into the slope, their hooves striking sparks from the loose stones, and you hear their breathing become louder and more rapid. You speak to them in a low voice, encouraging them with words that are more sound than meaning, and they respond by keeping their steady, unhurried pace. Step by step you climb the ramp, and the notch grows larger and closer until you can see through it to the sky beyond. A different sky, the sky of the eastern side of the mountains. Then the grade flattens, and the stones underfoot become level, and you are standing in the pass. You stop walking and simply stand, your chest rising and falling with your deep breaths, your staff planted on the ground before you. The mules stop behind you, and Surus lets out a long, fluttering breath through his nostrils, a sound of release and arrival. The pass is a narrow, wind-swept gap between two high peaks, its floor made of smooth, weathered limestone that has been polished by centuries of hooves and sandals and the endless scouring of the wind. To your left, the western peak rises in a series of jagged cliffs, its face dark and shadowed. To your right, the eastern peak is a gentler slope of loose scree and tough grass, its summit invisible behind a shoulder of rock. And ahead of you, through the notch, the land falls away into a completely different world. You step forward to the edge of the pass and look out, and the view opens up before you with a sudden, silent expansiveness. The eastern side of the mountains is a vast, rolling landscape of deep green ridges and dark forested valleys, stretching away to a horizon that is soft with haze. A river winds through the nearest valley, a broad silver thread that catches the morning light and throws it back in sharp, brilliant glints. The ridges overlap and fold into one another like the layers of a great crumpled cloth, each one a slightly different shade of green, from the pale, almost yellow green of the sunlit slopes to the deep blue-green of the shaded hollows. In the far distance, so far that it might be a cloud or a mountain range, a line of pale blue rises against the sky, the next range of peaks beyond this one, the next barrier, the next stage of a journey that could go on forever if you let it. You stand in the pass for a long time, not resting, but simply looking. The wind moves through the gap with a steady, low-pressure flow, cool and clean, and carrying no scent but the bare, mineral breath of the mountain itself. It ruffles your hair and tugs at the edge of your cloak, and you lean into it slightly, feeling its push against your body. The mules stand behind you in the shelter of the rocks, their heads lowered and their eyes half closed, and they do not seem to share your need to look. For them the pass is just another place on the road, another stretch of stone to cross, another point between where they were and where they are going. But for you, there is something in this moment, something quiet and still and complete that makes you want to stay just a little longer. You look back the way you came, through the western notch, and you see the valley you climbed through yesterday and the day before. It is a deep shadowed trough, filled with the last remnants of the mist, and beyond it the coastal plain is a pale hazy stripe that melts into the distant glimmer of the sea. The sea is a line of silver at the very edge of the world, and you cannot quite tell where the water ends and the sky begins. The road you walked is invisible from this height, hidden in the folds of the land, but you know it is there, and you know you will walk it again some day. The thought is not nostalgic or sad, just a fact, one more stone in the long cairn of the journey. After a while you turn back to the east, and you feel a subtle shift inside you, a turning of the page. The climb is over. The descent lies ahead. You pick up your staff, which you had leaned against a rock, and you plick your tongue to the mules. Surus lifts his head and steps forward, his hooves clacking on the smooth stone of the pass, and the smaller mule follows. You walk through the notch and begin the descent, and the road immediately changes character, becoming a gentle, downward-sloping track of packed earth and gravel that winds in lazy curves through the scrubby vegetation of the eastern slope. The sun is fully up now, and it warms your face as you walk, and the wind that was so steady in the pass drops away, blocked by the bulk of the mountain. The air grows warmer, and after 100 paces you loosen your cloak and let it hang open, the cool breeze of the descent flowing through your tunic and drying the sweat on your back. The pass remains behind you, a silent notch in the ridge that will hold the morning light until the sun moves on, and then will hold the afternoon light, and then the stars, just as it has for all the ages before you came, and will for all the ages after you leave. You do not look back at it, though you feel its presence receding behind you like a quiet friend who has seen you safely across and now waits for the next traveller. The road unspools ahead of you into the new green country of the east, and you walk it with the same steady pace you have kept since the warehouse door, the salt sacks rocking on the mules' backs, and your staff tapping a lighter, easier rhythm on the downward slope. The road on the eastern side of the pass begins its descent not with the steep, aggressive switchbacks of the western climb, but with a series of long, gentle traverses that angle lazily across the mountainside, as if the builders had all the time in the world and saw no reason to hurry the traveller downhill. The surface underfoot is different too, a soft reddish gravel mixed with packed earth that yields slightly with each step and makes a quiet crunching sound like walking on dry leaves. Your feet appreciate the change after the hard limestone of the pass, and your knees, which had braced themselves for the jarring impact of a steep descent, relax into the easier rhythm. The mules seem equally pleased, their hooves making a softer, more muffled sound on the forgiving surface, and their pace picks up just fractionally, their heads lifting with a renewed energy that comes from knowing that the hardest part of the journey is behind them. The vegetation changes quickly as you lose elevation, the bare rock and sparse scrub of the high country giving way within the first half-mile to a more generous covering of juniper bushes and aromatic shrubs. The junipers are low and twisted, their branches spreading outward rather than upward, and their needles are a dark dusty green that contrasts with the reddish soil. They release a sharp, clean scent when your leg brushes against them, a smell like pine but spicier, more resinous, and it mingles with the other scents of the descent, the dry warmth of the earth, the faint sweetness of some small white flower that grows in clusters beside the road, and the distant, almost imaginary smell of water from the river that you glimpsed from the pass. The air itself is warmer here, noticeably so, and the thin, piercing quality of the high altitude has been replaced by something thicker and more comforting, an air that fills your lungs with less effort and carries the promise of the warm afternoon ahead. You pause at a wide bend in the road where a large flat rock offers a natural seat, not because you are tired, but because the view has opened up and it seems right to stop and look. You plant your staff against the rock and sit down, your legs dangling over the edge, and the mules stop behind you without needing to be told, dropping their heads to nibble at the sparse grass that grows along the roadside. The view from this bend is a sweeping panorama of the valley below, much closer now than it was from the pass, and you can make out individual details that were only shapes before. The river is visible in several places where the land opens up, its water a bright, pale blue that seems too vivid to be real, and it winds through a flat, cultivated valley floor divided into small fields of varying greens. Some fields of the pale, tender green of young wheat, others the deeper bluish green of vegetable plots, and still others the brown of freshly turned soil waiting for seed. The fields are separated by lines of poplar trees that stand straight and tall like columns, their leaves shimmering silver green when the breeze moves through them, and you can see a few farmhouses scattered across the valley, their terracotta roofs a warm orange red that glows in the morning sun. The road you will walk winds down through a series of descending ridges, each one a little lower and a little greener than the last, and you trace its path with your eyes as it snakes through the scrub and disappears into the first patch of forest that marks the lower slopes. The forest is a darker green than the juniper scrub, a dense, mixed woodland of oak and chestnut that looks cool and inviting from this height, and you can see the road emerging from it farther down, a pale thread that crosses the valley floor and heads straight toward the river. The river crossing is marked by a small stone bridge, just visible as a dark line against the bright water, and on the far bank the road continues through a cluster of buildings that must be the village where you are headed. The village is still a long way off, a good afternoon of walking at least, but seeing it gives a shape to the remainder of the journey, a quiet sense of direction that is less a goal than a gentle pull. You sit on the rock for a while, your hands resting on your knees, and you let the warmth of the sun soak into your shoulders. The sun is higher now than it was in the past, and it has lost the pale, watery quality of early morning, becoming a rich golden light that feels heavy and substantial. It warms the rock beneath you and the air around you, and you feel the last of the morning chill finally leave your body, replaced by a comfortable, drowsy heat. A lizard scuttles across the rock near your hand, a small brown creature with a bright green throat, and it pauses for a moment to look at you with one tiny black eye before darting into a crevice. You watch it go and then stand up, brushing the reddish dust from the back of your tunic, and you pick up your staff and click your tongue to the mules. They lift their heads from the grass and fall into line behind you, their hooves resuming their steady, crunching rhythm on the gravel. The road continues its gentle descent, and the junipers gradually give way to taller bushes and then to the first scattered trees, small, gnarled oaks that are widely spaced and cast only a light, dappled shade. The undergrowth here is thicker, a tangle of wild rosemary and lavender and a dozen other plants whose names you do not know, and the air is filled with the sound of insects, a continuous high-pitched drone that rises and falls in waves. Bees move among the lavender bushes, their bodies heavy with pollen, and the sound of their buzzing is a low, sleepy note that harmonizes with the higher drone of the flies and the occasional chirp of a cricket. The road passes through this buzzing, fragrant landscape for perhaps a mile, and then the trees begin to thicken and grow taller, and you enter the edge of the forest. The forest on the eastern slope is different from the forest on the western side. Though the trees are the same species, it feels older and more settled, with a deeper layer of leaf litter on the ground and a higher, more complete canopy overhead. The oaks and chestnuts grow straight and tall, their trunks spaced far enough apart that you can see a good distance through the trees, and the undergrowth is sparse, mostly ferns and the occasional cluster of pale mushrooms. The light that filters through the canopy is a soft green gold that seems to glow rather than shine, and it gives everything a calm, underwater quality that is deeply peaceful. The air is cooler here than on the open slope, and it carries the rich, earthy scent of decaying leaves and the faint, sweet fragrance of the chestnut flowers, which are just beginning to bloom in clusters of pale pink and white. The mule's hooves make almost no sound on the thick carpet of leaves, and the only noise is the creak of the harness and the occasional distant call of a bird. You pass a tall stone column that stands at the side of the road, a distance marker carved from a single piece of pale limestone. It is taller than the milestones you passed on the plain, more ornate, with a carved cap and a base that has sunk slightly into the earth over the centuries. The numbers carved on its face are still sharp and readable, and you glance at them as you pass, noting the distance without really thinking about it. The numbers tell you that you are now closer to the village than to the pass, which is a quiet satisfaction, like finishing the first half of a familiar piece of music. The mules walk past the column without pausing, and you follow them, your staff ticking against the stone base as you go by. The road winds through the forest in a series of lazy curves, never steep enough to make the walking difficult, and you fall into a rhythm that is even more relaxed than the rhythm of the morning. Your legs move automatically, your breathing is slow and deep, and your mind drifts without direction, touching lightly on small observations and then letting them go. The pattern of the bark on a chestnut tree, the way a shaft of sunlight catches a single fern frond and makes it glow like green glass, the soft, throaty call of a wood pigeon somewhere in the canopy, the way Surus flicks his ear when a fly lands on it. These small things come and go like ripples on a pond, leaving no trace behind. After an hour or so, the forest begins to thin out again, and you catch glimpses of open sky through the trees. The road straightens and levels, and then you emerge from the trees onto a broad, sunny slope that descends gently toward the valley floor. The change is so gradual that you do not notice the exact moment when you leave the forest, but suddenly you are in the open again, and the sun is warm on your face and the whole valley is spread out before you like a map unrolled on a table. The river is much closer now, its water a bright, glittering blue, and you can hear it for the first time, a distant, steady murmur that underlies the closer sounds of the birds and the wind. The village on the far bank is clearer too, its cluster of red roofs and the thin spire of a small temple or public building rising above the houses, and you can see the stone bridge clearly now, its 3 arches reflected in the still water of the river. The road down the sunny slope is lined with wildflowers, a profusion of colour that is almost startling after the subdued greens of the forest. There are red poppies and blue cornflowers and white daisies, all growing together in a tangled, cheerful mass, and the bees that you heard in the scrub are even more numerous here, their buzzing a constant, drowsy hum. Butterflies move among the flowers as well, small yellow ones and larger white ones with black-tipped wings, and they flutter across the road in front of you, rising and falling on the light breeze. You walk through this garden of wild flowers with the mules behind you, and the salt sacks sway gently on their backs, and everything seems to have slowed down to a pace that matches the lazy drift of the butterflies. The road reaches the valley floor and straightens out, running now on a raised causeway of packed earth between the cultivated fields. The fields on either side are planted with wheat and barley, and rows of vegetables, and you can see the farmers working in the distance, small figures bent over their tasks. One of them stands up and waves. A brief raising of a hand, and you wave back without stopping. The causeway is lined with poplar trees that cast a dappled shade, and their leaves make a soft, rustling sound that is like the whisper of water. The river is louder now, a steady rushing murmur that grows with every step, and soon you can see it through the trees, a broad expanse of pale blue water flowing smoothly between banks of gravel and willow. The sun is past its peak now, beginning its slow descent toward the western ridge, and your shadow stretches out long in front of you, a dark, distorted shape that slides over the packed earth of the causeway. The heat of the day is at its fullest, and you loosen your tunic further, letting the air move across your chest. The water skin is warm from the sun, but you drink anyway, the water wet and welcome even if it is no longer cool. You pour a little into your palm and splash it onto the back of your neck, and the evaporation cools you briefly before the warmth returns. The mules plod along steadily, their coats dry and dusty, and you know they would appreciate the river crossing where they can drink and perhaps stand in the shallow water for a moment. The road makes a final turn, and then you are at the river bank, and the stone bridge rises before you, its 3 arches elegant and solid, its stones the same pale grey limestone as the pass, but cut and dressed by skilled masons long ago. The bridge is old, very old, and its surface is worn smooth by the hooves and wheels and feet of countless travellers, and there are patches of moss growing in the crevices between the stones, a bright vivid green that contrasts with the grey. You stop at the foot of the bridge and look at the river, which flows beneath the arches with a smooth, silent power, its surface unbroken except for the occasional swirl of a current. The water is clear enough that you can see the gravel bed on the far side, and you can see the dark shapes of fish moving slowly against the current, their bodies flickering like shadows. A willow tree grows on the near bank, its long trailing branches dipping into the water and swaying with the flow, and a kingfisher perches on one of the branches, a flash of brilliant blue and orange that darts away upstream as you approach. You lead the mules across the bridge, their hooves making a hollow echoing sound on the stone that bounces back from the arches. The sound is different from any other sound on the journey, a deep, resonant clop that seems to come from all directions at once, and the mules flick their ears at the strangeness of it, but do not hesitate. You stop in the middle of the bridge, as you often do, and lean on the low stone parapet, looking down at the water. The river flows beneath you with a quiet, immense power, and the sound of it fills your ears and drowns out all other sounds. The water is a pale, milky blue from the limestone it has dissolved, and it swirls around the piers of the bridge in smooth, glassy curves that are hypnotic to watch. You stay there for a while, your arms resting on the warm stone, and you feel the deep, quiet tiredness of the long descent settling into your bones, a tiredness that is not exhaustion, but completion. On the far bank you lead the mules down a small gravel path to the water's edge, and they wade into the shallows and drink deeply, their muzzles submerged to the nostrils. You kneel on the gravel and refill your water skin from the river, and then you splash water onto your face and arms, washing away the dust and sweat of the day. The water is cool, but not cold, and it feels like a small renewal, a freshening that prepares you for the final stretch of the journey. You let the mules stand in the water for a few minutes longer, and then you lead them back up to the road, their hooves leaving wet prints on the gravel that will dry in minutes under the warm sun. The village is now very close, just a short walk along a flat road that runs between fields of sunflowers, their heavy yellow heads turning to follow the sun. The sunflowers are taller than you, their thick hairy stalks rising from the dark earth, and they create a corridor of green and gold that leads straight toward the village gates. The salt sacks are still secure, still rocking gently with each step, and the mules walk with a steady, unhurried pace that seems to understand that the journey is nearly done. You walk with them, your staff tapping the road, and you watch the village grow larger and more distinct with each step, its roofs and walls and the faint sounds of daily life drifting out to meet you on the warm afternoon air. The gravel path from the river bank leads back up to the road, and the mules climb it with the slow, careful steps of animals who have drunk their fill and are now thinking of nothing but the steady rhythm of walking. Their hooves are still wet from the shallows, leaving dark prints on the pale stone that shrink and fade as the water evaporates in the warm afternoon sun. You follow them up the path, your sandals slipping slightly on the loose gravel, and then you are back on the raised causeway that runs straight across the valley floor toward the village. The river is behind you now, its murmur gradually fading as you walk, replaced by the closer sounds of the road, the crunch of gravel, the creak of leather, the soft jingle of the harness rings, and the distant, intermittent barking of a dog somewhere near the village gates. The causeway is lined on both sides by tall poplar trees that were planted long ago by someone who understood that travelers appreciate shade on a warm afternoon. The trees are mature and stately, their straight trunks rising like columns to a high canopy of shimmering leaves, and the shade they cast is dappled and constantly moving, a shifting pattern of light and dark that slides across the road surface and across your arms and shoulders as you walk. The poplar leaves make a distinctive sound in the breeze, a soft, papery rustle that is different from the sound of oak or chestnut, lighter and more delicate, like the whisper of many small voices far away. The sound is continuous and soothing, and it blends with the other sounds of the afternoon to create a quiet symphony that requires no attention. The fields on either side of the causeway are different from the fields you saw from the mountain. Here on the valley floor the soil is darker and richer, an alluvial loam that has been deposited by the river over countless centuries of flooding, and the crops grow thick and tall as a result. To your left is a field of sunflowers, their heavy heads all turned toward the west, as if they are watching the sun begin its slow descent. The flowers are taller than a man, their thick hairy stalks are pale green, and their petals are brilliant dusty gold that seems to glow even in the shade. Bees move among the sunflower heads, their bodies heavy with pollen, and the low hum of their activity is a constant, drowsy background note. To your right is a field of some grain that you do not recognize, perhaps spelt or emmer. Its stalks are pale amber, and its seed heads nodding in the breeze. The grain rustles as the wind passes through it, a sound like the pages of a very large book being turned slowly, and the overall effect is one of abundance and peace. You walk along the causeway with the mules behind you, and you feel the flatness of the ground as a kind of relief after so many hours of climbing and descending. Your legs appreciate the absence of grade, and your pace settles into an easy ground-covering stride that eats up the distance without effort. The village is visible ahead, growing larger with each step, and you can now make out individual buildings and the spaces between them. The houses are simple stone structures with roofs of curved terracotta tiles. Their walls are warm sun-bleached ochre, and they are clustered around a central square where a small fountain or well is just visible as a dark dot. The thin spire you saw from the mountain belongs to a small temple. its triangular pediment supported by two plain columns, and it stands at the far end of the square, its whitewashed walls gleaming in the afternoon light. Smoke rises from several chimneys, thin columns of pale grey that stand almost vertical in the still air, and the smell of wood smoke drifts across the fields, a homely, welcoming scent that makes you think of the evening meal that waits at the end of the journey. The road passes a small farmhouse set back from the causeway, its walls whitewashed and its door painted a faded blue. A woman is working in the kitchen garden beside the house, bending to pull weeds from between rows of cabbages and leeks, and she straightens up as you pass, her hand pressing into the small of her back. She is middle-aged, her hair tied back in a simple cloth, and her face is flushed from the work. She nods at you, a brief, friendly gesture, and you nod back, raising your staff slightly in greeting. A small child appears in the doorway of the farmhouse, a toddler in a simple linen shift, and the woman turns to scoop the child up and settle it on her hip. The child stares at the mules with wide, curious eyes, and you see its small hand wave as you pass. You wave back, a slow, gentle motion, and then the farmhouse is behind you, and the road continues. The causeway leads to a crossroads, where another road, smaller and less travelled, branches off to the south and disappears into a grove of olive trees. At the corner of the crossroads stands a small stone shrine similar to the one you rested at on the mountain, though this one is better maintained, its niche swept clean, and its terracotta figure freshly painted in faded reds and blues. A clay lamp burns on the ledge, its small flame steady and bright even in the daylight, and a garland of dried flowers hangs from a peg beside the niche. You do not stop at this shrine, but you notice it as you pass, and you feel a small sense of continuity, a thread that connects this place to the mountain shrine, and the mountain shrine to the warehouse, and the warehouse to every other journey you have made. The road is a single, unbroken thing, and the shrines are its punctuation. Beyond the crossroads, the causeway continues straight toward the village, and now you can hear the sounds of daily life more clearly. The clank of a hammer on metal, perhaps a blacksmith at work. The crowing of a rooster, though the morning is long past. The murmur of voices, indistinct but human, drifting from the direction of the square. The sound of a door closing, a wooden thud that echoes briefly. These sounds are ordinary and unremarkable, but they signal the nearness of other people, the presence of a community, and you find yourself looking forward to the simple human contact of the warehouse and the inn. Not conversation, not companionship, just the quiet acknowledgement of other people going about their own tasks, the same way the shepherd shared his stew without needing to talk. The road narrows slightly as it enters the outskirts of the village, the open fields giving way to small gardens and orchards enclosed by low stone walls. The walls are made of the same pale limestone as the bridge and the pass, and they are covered with climbing plants, roses and honeysuckle, and a thick, woody vine with small purple flowers that hang in clusters. The scent of the flowers is sweet and heavy in the warm air, and it mixes with the smell of ripe figs from an orchard where the trees are bent low with fruit. The figs are a deep, dusty purple, nearly black, and some have split open to reveal the bright pink flesh inside. You could reach over the wall and pick one, but you do not, because the fruit belongs to someone else, and because you are not hungry. The sight of them is enough, a small pleasure to carry with you into the village. The first houses of the village proper appear on either side of the road, their walls abutting directly onto the street. The houses are built of stone, but plastered with a pale sandy stucco that has cracked in places, revealing the darker stone beneath, and their roofs are of the same terracotta tiles, now faded to a soft, dusty rose. The windows are small and unglazed, their shutters thrown open to let in the afternoon air, and you catch glimpses of interior rooms, a loom standing by a window, a shelf of clay pots, a sleeping cat curled on a cushion. The street is paved with flat stones that are worn smooth in the center and rough at the edges, and the mule's hooves make a loud, echoing clatter that bounces off the walls and announces your arrival to anyone who is listening. A dog trots out from a side alley, a medium-sized brown animal with floppy ears, and it sniffs at the mule's legs before losing interest and trotting away. Surus flicks an ear at the dog, but does not alter his pace. The street opens out into the central square, and you stop for a moment at its edge to take in the scene. The square is not large, perhaps 30 paces across, paved with the same flat stones, and surrounded on all sides by buildings. In the center stands the fountain you saw from a distance, a simple stone basin fed by a lead pipe that pours a continuous stream of clear water. The water splashes into the basin with a cheerful splattering sound, and a small channel carries the overflow away through a grating in the stones. A few people are gathered around the fountain, filling clay jars and exchanging quiet words, and they glance up as you enter the square but do not stare. A mule driver arriving with salt is an ordinary event too common to remark upon, and they return to their conversations without pause. On the far side of the square stands the salt warehouse, a building very similar to the one you left on the coastal plain. It is a long, low structure of limestone blocks with a roof of terracotta tiles. Its wooden door standing open at a dim, cool interior visible beyond. Beside the warehouse is the inn, a slightly larger building with a wooden sign hanging over the door, painted with a simple image of a mule that has faded to a ghostly outline. The inn has a bench outside its door and a few empty clay cups on the flagstones, and the smell of cooking wafts from its open windows, a savory, earthy smell that makes your stomach stir in quiet anticipation. You take in all of this in a single, slow glance, and then you click your tongue and lead the mules toward the warehouse door. The warehouse keeper is waiting just inside the entrance, a stocky man with a bald head and a leather apron, and he looks up from a wax tablet as you approach. He does not smile, but his nod is welcoming in its own quiet way. You lead the mules into the cool, dim interior of the warehouse, and the change from the bright afternoon sun makes you blink for a moment while your eyes adjust. The warehouse smells of salt and wood, and the faint, musty scent of old grain, the same smell as the coastal warehouse, and the familiarity of it is settling. The keeper gestures to a clear space on the packed earth floor, and you lead the mules there and begin the final unloading of the journey. You untie the lashings and lift the salt sacks down one by one, carrying them to a wooden pallet that stands against the far wall. The sacks are warm from the sun and the mule's body heat, and they crinkle softly as you stack them. The warehouse keeper counts them with a stylus pressed into the wax of his tablet, making small, precise marks, though he does not speak the numbers aloud. You watch him for a moment and then return to your task, lifting the last sack into place and stepping back. The pallet holds all 4 sacks, neat and square, and the salt inside them is now at its destination. The transaction is complete without any words of negotiation or agreement. The salts will be weighed and recorded, and in the morning you will receive the bundles of wool and pottery that you will carry back to the coast. It is the same routine you have followed 100 times. You lead the mules out of the warehouse and around to the stable that stands behind it, a simple structure with stalls of wooden planks and a floor of packed straw. You remove the pack saddles and set them aside, and you rub down the mules with handfuls of straw, scraping the sweat and dust from their coats in long, firm strokes. Surus leans into the pressure, his eyes half closing, and the smaller mule exhales a long, fluttering breath of contentment. You fill their feed bags with fresh grain and set them in the stalls, and you fill a wooden bucket with water from a cistern and set it where they can reach it. The mules lower their heads and begin to eat, and you stand for a moment with your hand on Surus's neck, feeling the warmth of his skin and the steady, reliable beat of his pulse. Then you turn and walk out of the stable. The inn is a short walk across the square, and you cross it slowly, your staff in your hand and your cloak over your arm. The sun is now low in the west, a great orange disk that touches the tops of the poplar trees, and the square is bathed in a warm golden light that makes the stone walls glow. You stop at the fountain and wash your hands and face, the water cool and clean, and you cup some water into your mouth, rinsing away the dust of the road. Then you walk to the inn and push open the wooden door. The interior is dim and warm, with a low ceiling of dark beams and a floor of worn flagstones, and a fire burns in a small hearth at the far end, its flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. The innkeeper, a woman with grey hair and a calm, unhurried manner, looks up from a pot she is stirring and nods at a wooden bench near the fire. You sit down, your back against the warm stone of the hearth, and you let out a long, slow breath that seems to carry with it all the miles of the journey. A bowl of soup will come soon, and a cup of watered wine, and then a sleeping pallet in a quiet corner. For now you simply sit, watching the firelight and listening to the quiet sounds of the inn, and you feel the deep, quiet satisfaction of a journey completed without hurry and without event. The fire in the inn's hearth burns with a low, steady flame, its light casting a warm orange glow across the flagstone floor and the dark wooden beams of the ceiling. You sit on the wooden bench with your back against the stone wall of the hearth, and the heat seeps through your tunic and into the tired muscles of your shoulders and back, loosening the last small knots of tension that the long descent could not reach. Your staff leans against the wall beside you, its chestnut wood gleaming faintly in the firelight, and your cloak is folded on the bench at your side, still warm from the afternoon sun. The inn is quiet at this hour, the only other occupant an older man sitting at a table near the door, his head bent over a clay cup, and his thoughts apparently far away. The innkeeper moves between the hearth and the back room, her steps slow and unhurried, and the sound of her sandals on the flagstones is a soft, rhythmic scuff that blends with the crackle of the fire. She brings you a bowl of soup without being asked, setting it on the bench beside you with a simple nod. The bowl is made of plain red clay, its surface unglazed and slightly rough to the touch, and the soup inside is a thick, pale liquid with chunks of barley and small pieces of vegetable that float just beneath the surface. The steam rises from the bowl in the gentle, twisting column, carrying a smell of herbs and slow-cooked grain, and the faint, savory undertone of vegetable stock. You wrap your hands around the bowl, feeling the warmth spread into your palms, and you lift it to your lips and take the first sip. The soup is hot, but not scalding, its flavor mild and simple, the taste of barley and leeks and a hint of wild thyme that reminds you of the mountain slopes. You eat slowly, spooning up the barley grains and chewing them with the same deliberate rhythm with which you have done everything on this journey, and the warmth of the soup spreads through your chest and settles in your stomach like a small, comforting stone. After the soup, the innkeeper brings you a cup of watered wine, the clay cool against your fingers, and the liquid a pale pinkish color that catches the firelight. The wine is slightly sour and very weak, more water than wine, but it wets your mouth and washes away the last of the road dust from your throat. You drink it slowly, taking small sips and letting each one linger, and you watch the fire as it burns down into a bed of glowing coals. The flames are small now, flickering blue and orange at the edges of the logs, and the coals pulse with a deep red light that seems to breathe in a slow, steady rhythm. The older man at the table finishes his cup and stands up, nodding to the innkeeper as he leaves, and the door closes behind him with a soft wooden thud. You are now the only guest in the inn, and the quiet deepens until the only sounds are the crackle of the coals and the distant, muffled noises of the village settling in for the night. You think about the mules in the stable behind the warehouse, standing in their stalls with their heads lowered and their weight resting on 3 legs, their bellies full of grain, and their coats brushed clean of the day's dust. You picture Cyrus in his stall, the white star on his forehead just visible in the dim light, and the smaller mule in the stall beside him, her tail swishing slowly as she dozes. The image is a pleasant one, a quiet assurance that the animals who carried your salt across the mountains are warm and fed and safe, and you hold it in your mind for a moment before letting it go. The salt sacks are stacked on their pallet in the warehouse, their linen fabric cool and dry, and the salt inside them is now part of this village's stores, waiting to be traded or used, just as the salt from your previous journeys is now part of 100 different meals in 100 different kitchens across the interior valleys. The innkeeper banks the fire for the night, spreading the coals with an iron poker and